You want to put yourself in a good posture. So the main thing is to have your back as extended as possible, as if the back is straight. And perfectly okay to sit in a chair, just have your feet straight down so the body's balanced. Lightly close your eyes. And slowly allow yourself to relax into this position. Just check any places in your body that you're holding tension. And slowly just breathe into them and allow that tension to release. Bringing yourself to as relaxed a place as possible. So feel free to adjust your body if you need to. Slowly bring your awareness to your breath. Just allow the mind to settle down here into this space. Whatever distractions arise from what you think you should be doing today, your lists, errands, just leave that, let it go. Just bringing your awareness back to the breath. So we have an opportunity to be happy today or not to be happy. Completely up to our own attitude. And one thing that really helps direct us towards happiness is to set a good motivation. This is part of yesterday's exercise. But take a moment to think about your purpose for being here this afternoon. And if it's possible to align that purpose with something we call Mahayana motivation. Mahayana is a Sanskrit word, greater vehicle, universal vehicle, where you're interested in getting some information today that may help you progress along the path to full awakening, basically to a place where you are completely unlimited in how you can best help all others. So Mahayana purpose is about benefiting all others, all living beings. See if you can align your motivation with that and set a good intention right now for this time. Also putting your mind in as positive a place as possible. And now imagine over top the crown of your head is a radiant drop of light. Tiny little drop like a jewel. And imagine this drop dissolves into your crown. This is your gratitude. This drop of gratitude. So sometimes we complain about things. Sometimes we take things for granted. And overall, a lot in our society, we don't appreciate the wonderful situation that we now have. For instance, you can reflect on relatively clean air and water, readily available in our environment. We've all had good access to public education, beautiful food, easily accessible. We have a warm bed to sleep in every night in a safe place, shelter, clothing. These are just the basics. Many people in the world don't have this. So just reflect on some situations like this in your life that Buddhism would say you created for yourself. And allow that drop of gratitude to move through your whole body. Imagine it moving through the bloodstream, moving through all the neurological activity, every organ, every cell, every atom. And imagine it also moving through all of your mental experiences, every thought, every idea, every memory. And allow that wave of appreciation to melt, to soak through your body and mind. So just reflect for a moment also excuse me, your positive traits, you personally, positive things that you do, think, and say. Just take a moment, just reflect briefly. Not being distracted by the negative things you do, just the positive things. And slowly, when you're ready, please open your eyes. So I want to ask some of the people that were here yesterday, we had a great class yesterday, how did it go? You were supposed to leave here, right when you left here, there was a motivation for walking or driving home, right? We started there. Because sometimes by the time you get to the night, you've forgotten. So I tried to, now I know some people forgot. Okay, so I just want to ask, did anybody do that? How was that?
Well, I didn't remember I was supposed to do it until I did a kind of an aggressive driving route.
Great, okay,
And then
super.
And you know, it was a four-way intersection, and I could have let that person go, and I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, oops. You know, and then I got back on track for the rest of the drive home, but, you know.
That's great. Okay, but wait, tell me your name again. It's
John.
John. So, this is fantastic practice. So we're talking about practice. We're putting it right into practice. We're not going to waste time here with theory, and this is how you know, is one way to practice Dharma. So, fantastic example. So, he caught himself, you know, and so then just now though he said, so and then the rest of my drive, something like that, I, you know, was aware, but.
I slowed down to 5 miles an hour, like you said, let people go and didn't cut people off. And, you know, it was just nice and calm the rest of the way.
Great. Okay. Because the first thing I thought he was saying was he said what he did do, he caught it, and then I thought you said but.
Well, I always say but.
Okay.
But no,
So,
but I did better.
But you did better. Oh, good, good. Okay. Because what happens is you say, well, I initially, this is the habits we were talking about yesterday. I'm trying to get people out of these habits, the low self-esteem, where anxiety and depression takes root, okay? So you say, well, I forgot, but then I remembered, I did this aggressive move, then I caught it, and then I drove pretty well the rest of the way, but, because you go back to, but I forgot, initially. And so really that whole wonderful exercise that he did that I think is fantastic, he kind of tried to negate, because I'm still crap, okay? So really rejoice, I rejoice for you. I mean, that moves me. And how did it feel when you got home?
Felt
How
good.
did you feel?
I mean, I felt better about myself, and you know, I'm usually my wife is the aggressive driver. I'm usually not as aggressive. I was just rushing that one time.
That's what he says, right? Okay. Yeah. No, I'm joking. I'm teasing.
Yeah.
Right. So that's super. That's amazing. And then, who else? Somebody else over here. Yep. Thank you. That was great. I rejoice for you. That's wonderful.
I've been noticing my driving since you mentioned it last Monday. And Tuesday morning on my way to work, I noticed how much more peaceful I was. And so I've been continuing it for all week. And I feel as though it's it's moving into the rest of my life.
Nice. Right? So I mentioned a little bit, if you slow down 5 miles an hour, it affords you to be more vigilant. You know, you can notice more if you're driving more slowly. Well, that makes sense. It's not necessarily a Dharma thing, right? But I went to once a program with Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Vietnamese master, many years ago, and I remember, I lived in California. Everybody drives a lot in California, as you know, right? And I used to drive a lot, and large spaces between places, so some people would drive quite fast, and he said, and he speaks very slowly, he said, when your car goes fast, you go fast. And I remember thinking, huh, you know, like what a revelation. And so I would slow down and notice that my mind would slow down and I could be more observant and see. So if only we could bring all of Boston into this room and have a little driving exercise. This morning when I drove, I was out and then I drove back, and it was like an obstacle course. You know, it was like, you know, somebody pulls out, and then this, you know, fire truck backed up, and then another van, and then, you know, and because I was driving pretty slowly, you know, it wasn't actually stressful at all. I was just kind of looking around, you know, like, okay, I need to pull over here, now I can go, now I have to wait, now, you know. So, and so then we had an exercise in the evening to see how the day went, and then you were going to also have a motivation for sleeping. Anybody do that? Okay, you know what? You have another night tonight. Okay, good thing. You did it. You did. Yeah. How did that go for you?
Good.
Yeah. And any personal feelings of feeling a little bit more self-worth like that?
You know, I always do the good but.
Okay.
You know, I'll go to sleep and say, because what comes to mind is, I forget who told me this, that I think Sun Malala said, you know, that Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, you know, sleep is a disgusting waste of time. And so then I started thinking, well, because he thinks it's a disgusting waste of time, and he manages to not sleep, that because I need sleep, I shouldn't somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But
yes.
You know, and then I remembered His Holiness, I think he said somewhere, you know, he needs 8 hours of sleep every night.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So 2 different ways people manifest, you know, highly realized beings, and this was part of the discussion I mentioned maybe yesterday, I can't remember, about, we had a meeting with Lama Zopa, the directors of all the centers, a lot of centers, a few years ago, and this came up, that we see these directives from Rinpoche that we know will benefit people, but you're a human being, and you're, you know, overwhelmed with the center, and then this is happening, you've got your family, you've got your full-time job, a lot of, you know, and all these things, and then you get this thing of today you need to read this sutra 3 times, or you need to do this, and so sometimes that you just can't handle it. So we brought this to Rinpoche and said, you know, we measure ourselves up against Rinpoche, and, you know, he's an extraordinary being, and then Rinpoche said, you just try your best, that, you know, what else can you do? So I think what he'll do is, he'll say things, some things are for certain students that might be really lazy, or things like that. So I would kind of banish the but. I mean, I had to do that in my life a lot, where I'd have this thing like, that was good, but, you know, oh, yeah, I was right, but, you know, because the but's like an anchor, just sinks you right to the bottom of the sea once it's on there. So I just learned to kind of be like, yes, that was a good thing I did, period. I didn't need to have any further elaboration, but it takes some practice. So I would say Rinpoche is trying to show us where we can get to, but we need sleep. We're humans, and that's a normal, healthy way. And Rinpoche is aware of that. You know, he probably said it for somebody that needed to hear it like that. I've heard that in different teachings, and then there's somebody there that it's for them, you know, because they're wasting a lot of time or things like that. So I think it's great to keep on. And again, just notice it's just a pattern, it's just a habit. It'll keep coming up, and you just have to keep forging up that mountain. Sometimes the mountain feels really big, sometimes it's smaller, you know. Just reminded me of a dream I had last night, oddly enough. I was climbing these mountains, but I think I was driving and it was just insurmountable somehow. I remember thinking that was really dangerous, like how I had to drive up this thing. And it was like some kind of cosmic amusement park, I think. I don't know. So keep on, so that's great. It's great that you did that. So this morning we had an exercise. So I just did it a little bit over again to remind, and for the people that weren't here. And anybody get to that this morning? How did it go this morning? Yep.
I don't remember. I don't remember doing the nighttime thing, but I think I did. Because when I woke up this morning, way too early, I immediately thought, oh my god, I gotta do some, like, I got stuff to do. Did them and then realized I needed to go back to bed because it was still like 4 in the morning. But then couldn't sleep. But I did it again for real when I woke up officially. But I didn't remember the visualization. All I remembered was setting the intention for the day. And also what I remembered is like what I had done, what I wanted to change this today. So I must have set the intention last night because I was really sleepy and fell asleep really quickly. But even if I don't remember it, maybe it does have an effect. So.
Yes, yeah, it's interesting how there is subtle strands left. That's
so
great.
No visualization, but I did try to set the intention.
That's great. That's fantastic. Wonderful, thank you. So that's what we were talking about. When you go to sleep at night, you review the day. So if you set an intention in the morning, right, then at night you want to check back. Now if you can check back more in the day, for those of you when you don't work and you have a moment, maybe when your 5-year-old goes to school and suddenly you realize you had breakfast, they're out the door, and all of a sudden you have a moment to reflect. You can check your motivation again, but then at night often people have a little pocket of meditation and they think again. So that's right, this morning I had an intention, totally forgot about it, but how did the day go? You know, so the first part of this again was you first have to remember what went well, meaning what you did well. What depression and anxiety loves to root in low self-esteem. So we're very well patterned with what we don't do well. That has no problem getting accessed for most people. But we don't give ourselves enough credit for what did go well, and I'm not talking about in an egomaniacal sense. I'm talking about in a balanced way. You know, I was a little bit more patient with that person when they knocked on my door and I was having lunch and they were there, and then I realized I was a little bit more patient, and that was good. That was good. I'm happy I did that, you know, or whatever your thing is. You know, that I drove, I noticed my driving last night. That was great, you know, like touche. Really. So, you know, it's like that. I'm really glad I did that. You know, and you have a little bit of rejoicing, how wonderful that is, like that. And then you can look at what didn't go well. You know, and gently, what didn't go well, I was really impatient with, said a kind of snippy remark to somebody, maybe. And yeah, I'm not so happy about that. And then what you can do is determine that night, tomorrow when I see them, I'll apologize. Or tomorrow when I see that person, the first 5 minutes of the time I spend with them, I'm going to practice patience with them. Like they really drive me crazy, but that first 5 minutes I'm with them, I'm going to try to be really gentle with myself and just really attentive and patient and listen, and that's all. And after that, I don't know, but the first 5 minutes, I'll at least take responsibility for that. That's great. Some people do a purification practice then for whatever negative thing popped up, and then you're going to go to bed, that I have to sleep for my health, so I can be rested, so that tomorrow I'm more aware and awake and can be of the most benefit to others. Maybe it will help me move along a path to full awakening. Why do I want to be fully awake? Because then I can unlimitedly be of the most benefit to others. Buddha means fully awakened being. Why do we want to be a Buddha? Because of that, then I can help others unlimitedly. So with that motivation to benefit others, I go to sleep. Then your sleep becomes virtuous, like that. Does it make sense? Right? This is possible practical stuff. So you're going to forget, and you will forget, and you will forget. Okay, that's okay. put a note, make a note. Put a note on your dashboard of your car, on your refrigerator, maybe the bathroom mirror. And it's okay if you later, maybe it's at your office, your workplace, you have a little, and then you forgot and you get to work and you go, oh, I completely forgot there on your computer screen. Then right then, just have a motivation. You can always do it all day long. It's not, you know, and here's an example of, and sorry, you had a question, so let me, yeah.
Actually, it wasn't a question so much as sometimes it's good for me to say out loud my thought. And so after speaking with you yesterday, I forgot to do the positive part when I was reviewing and I was rewriting my pages. And I took an emotion that was uncomfortable about exposing myself and about my pride. And I saw the positive in the action and tried to strengthen that positive feeling inside myself.
Great. That's fantastic. Yeah, very nice. So, the other thing I was going to mention, here's a stress decreaser is I talked about, you know, slowing down driving 5 more minutes, by 5 miles an hour, sorry. But what about just general life? So we're in a culture that we're not really given permission to do that. And I teach all over the world, and I think American culture, and I've never been to Japan, which may be faster, I'm not sure, but they have a very different culture than we have. But in the States, people work harder than any other place I've taught and lived and been. We get 2 weeks off a year from standard jobs. That's what you start with. And if you think that's okay,
Right.
I think it's bizarre. I think it's really bizarre, this work ethic. I mean, we know it more here in this part of the country because of the Puritan work ethic. We have it more than anywhere. I grew up like that. So it's pretty intense. Once you go out of the country and see how other people do it, you kind of go like, wow, why are we doing it like that? Like, Europe doesn't do it like that. You know, you start there. My nephew, 23 years old, he has his first job out of university. I think he started with 4 to 6 weeks, like that. It's a normal way of living. It's civilized. It's a civilized thing to give people some space. So anyway, here we are in our culture. Okay, I accept this is how it is. I accept, however, at Dharma centers, the 2 Dharma centers I run, we do it differently. We give people more time off. I'm not gonna buy into that thing. That I don't think that's healthy. You could say the business suffers a bit, or you know, I don't think so. Staff are happier, and you know. So, but in any event, let's say that's your life. You can slow down just a little bit, a few paces. You know, I think you end up getting more done. I've noticed. I'm more focused, more mindful. I'm more aware of other people's feelings, what's happening for them. You know, there are times I have to race through things and I'm multitasking, and I know I don't enjoy it. I don't feel well. You know, I feel like I'm not having enough time for people. So just see in your life, where can you insert, and I'll just call it a pause, maybe. Here's a pause I did, okay, just a standard. One center I was helping run in San Francisco some years ago, and I was temping in law firms, corporate law firms. So, and I worked half the month. They paid me a lot of money, and I temped in these law firms. So half the month I was there for the center. It was me and a nun. I wasn't a nun then. She worked full time as a mechanical engineer, and a lot of her money went to support the center. Okay. So my deal was, she gave me a place to live. We were friends. She gave me free rent, and then I worked outside 2 weeks, and then if a lama came, all these teachers, I was always available. I was the one there to cook for them, to clean, to help, like that. So 2 weeks a month, I was in these law firms. I didn't like temping in the law firms, but it served me to do this other thing. And so one time they paired me with, I don't know, he was a little, I'll call him old school, Ted, a lawyer. And the other lawyers were younger and more modern, and I'll put it this way, they weren't going to ask me to wash their disgusting leftover the weekend coffee cup with all the mold in it. But Ted did. So I was kind of not, this is like not what I signed up for. And he was sometimes a bit rude, and I had also just come back from India, from a couple of years in India on retreat, and I was really struggling that this is what I was doing, and I was debating about picking up my career or serving the center. I was kind of in this was my first experience living, for the most part, living in centers. So I got really stressed because of an intention I had about how strongly I was holding myself and my views and what I wanted to do versus what I was doing, and my motivation was a bit skewed. My motivation would really, had I gotten clear that I really wanted to help and grow this center, which we did, and that I really loved doing that, and this was just a means to serve me doing that, I would have relaxed more, but I often forgot my motivation. Now I'm here, now I'm in front of him. So then I remembered, and I would find myself, my blood pressure, getting all flushed, and, wanted to say something rude to him. So I would go to the bathroom. That was my pause. You're allowed to go to the bathroom. Took myself to the bathroom. I didn't have to go to the bathroom, but I go into one of the stalls, sit down, and right there I go back to my breath. Because I'd be all flustered of like, he's such a jerk, and the moldy cup, it was disgusting and stunk. Let him clean out his own coffee cup. I don't even drink coffee, and I went through all these things in my mind of, it's all him, right? I wasn't even seeing him. He was just evil, just the horrible Ted, whatever. Went right back to my breathing. You just take a moment, just let me take a moment, So as soon as I started focusing on my breathing, but slow, first I needed a couple of deep inhales and exhales. Like I was so I did that, and then as soon as you start to do that, because when you're stressed, you're shallow breathing. I said yesterday, you're not getting oxygen that you need. So as soon as I started to deep breathe, I calmed down immediately, just instant. And all of a sudden I could start to just notice my mind going through its somersaults. He's the evil. However, this was my choice to do this work, knowing they will place me with different attorneys at different times. So I mean, I knew all this. This had nothing to do with him. And slowly, and then here's another practice I went through. I was a new Buddhist, just as I want to be happy and don't want to suffer, he wants to be happy and doesn't want to suffer. Seriously, is there anyone here that doesn't want that in this room right now? Right? Everybody wants that. So suddenly Ted and I now, and I said this a few times, I was sitting there saying, and I'm by myself, and you can say it to yourself, there's 3 stalls. Nobody's going to bother you in the stall. Not going to knock on the door, right? So, and I'm thinking, just as I want to be happy and don't want to suffer, he wants to be happy and doesn't want to suffer. And let that say, just as I want to be happy and don't want to suffer, he wants to be happy. Doesn't work. So I just had 3 little rounds in my mind, right? And then I thought, suddenly he and I have something in common now. So I thought, And wasn't it great that I did have this job that I could do whenever I wanted to do it? Basically, they'd work for me. And they paid me a lot of money to do this work, and the work was basically pretty easy to do. So some of the lawyers, some of them were nicer, some were more challenging. It was diverse, I met a lot of interesting people, things like that. So somehow, through this whole talking to myself and reestablishing my motivation, I walk out of the bathroom now. The whole thing took about 2 minutes. Out of the bathroom, I come out, and I honestly did see him in a different light. Suddenly I was like, and, and it ended up that we actually became friends, and I really ended up liking him. He really was a decent guy. He was just from that school that's what, your secretary does, or that's what it was no big deal. It wasn't any big deal. It was a way I could serve him. He was nice. He did things for me. He did some things for me that, the other attorneys I don't think would have thought of. So, there's a way that, and once we had a relationship, a good relationship, then I was very happy to do anything for him, and he was very happy to do anything for me. I think one day I had to leave early because, and sometimes I used to send out the center newsletters if he didn't have work for me. And I just said, is that okay? I'm working for this thing, and I have these newsletters, and if I don't have any work, and he's like, no. He goes, I don't mind. as long as you're available. And I'm like, sure. He didn't care. You know. So I think there's ways to insert a pause. Where can you put a pause in your life? Put a gap, a little bit of a gap. So initially you might be wedging it in. It's not a normal thing, but where do you need, it could be sometimes your 5-year-old, something's going on, a lot of things spinning around, your 17-year-old, and suddenly you just need a moment. I mean, kids get, you know, when we discipline kids and you make them have a moment, we need moments.
I give myself timeouts all the time.
Great. I think it's great to take a time out.
I do.
Right? Because in that time out, you can redirect your attitude. That's all that's going on. Is your attitude got off on the wrong track? It's not it's not your fault, and don't blame. It's just sometimes all of a sudden I'm headed into no-no land, you know. And you know, you have these days, and we say you got out of bed on the wrong side. You have days you're in a bad mood. Yeah? It's natural. Just a natural thing. So when I am, and the main thing for me is in the morning I notice immediately, where's my mind? How's my mind? You have days you woke up late, so you're already stressed.
Right.
It's natural, it happens. There's days you don't get enough sleep. Okay? So just note, the beginning again is notice, and then I can kind of know, okay, today I feel a bit stressed, a bit tight. So again, that's not the day to have that difficult conversation with somebody. Some days, feel really spacious, great. Then tackle something more difficult. You feel really tired one day, be gentle to yourself. One day you have a lot of energy, great. Okay? But every day could be great. Whatever shows up for you in your mind, it's okay. It's all good, actually. Right? It's all good. So, just to remind you, yesterday, and go through these things about, we were talking about distraction. We were talking about, from Rumi, okay? We were talking about limiting your technology, okay? About through distraction, we spin out of control. The mind's off, you know. So that's why I said have a technology holiday. Don't open your laptop. I have, like, afternoons I don't turn the phone on at all. I don't even hear it vibrate. It's off. I don't need that there. But why? I'm taking a break from my own. I'm either trying to work on this work project uninterruptedly, you know, or I want to really focus on this, or I'm doing some meditation, leading a course, doing some... I don't need that right then. Just because somebody feels they want to talk to me, you don't have to be interrupted by that. But that's your choice. Okay? Think about when somebody calls you. It's when they want to talk to you. Unless you set up a date with them at that time. It's when they want to talk to you. So what I also do when I phone someone and they happen to answer, I always say to them, is this a good time for you? Because just because they answer doesn't mean it's necessarily a good time. And if they're not stressed, they're not going to be listening. Actually, you can tell. And I'll say, oh, when's a good time? Sometimes they'll say, yeah, this is good, or no, it's really not. I'm on my way out. And so the same thing when you get called, you don't have to take every call. You don't have to respond to every email right away. Okay, so that's your choice. So we were saying because of the distraction, you miss getting to watch your mind, being observant, so then you're unable to counter negative behavior as it arises. Okay, so this was the thing from Rumi, that it's a little bit, distracted people don't notice they're in danger. Okay, you're dropping your vigilance, meaning vigilance could be the buts. Vigilance is depression, you know, you don't see depression. You don't see what triggers the depression. I don't see that if I'm around these people, I start to get angry. When I'm around in this situation, I get stress. I feel full of anxiety, right? So his quote again was, sit down and be quiet. You are drunk and this is the edge of the roof, right? So again, we are on the edge of the roof. So I want to wake up and be aware that I'm on the edge so I don't fall over the edge. You know, spiritual practice is being aware where you are at any moment. What's happening with your mind at any moment. That's what we're doing here. And again, with the internet, the quote was, to be everywhere, which you can be on the internet, is to be nowhere. So think about that sometimes. I think that's really helpful. So then we talked about what we're doing to counter, especially anxiety and depression, is you have to find a way to notice the behavior. That's spiritual practice. To watch your mind, observe, to notice your behavior, number one. Number two is, does anybody remember?
Do something different.
Try something different. Yes, thank you. Try something different. Okay? And then number three is you commit to practicing the new behavior until it becomes natural. Okay? This is why I repeat, because we forget a lot. And the teachers, when they teach the Lam Rim, basically they teach it once. Sometimes at the end of that teaching they repeat it. And the beginning of the next teaching they repeat what they taught you yesterday. That's the traditional way the Lam Rim was given. Why? It takes people usually 3 times to hear it, to get it. Right? So if you're a little bit more skilled, a little bit more alert, sometimes you hear it the first time, sometimes you remember it the second time. It's usually that third time you go, oh right, observe, do something different, and then commit to making that behavior natural. So again, the key on number 3 was commit. Make a commitment to yourself. If you found it beneficial, the driving, if you found it beneficial, Bob, you said the evening practice, or, then make a commitment to yourself. Because without the commitment, it's kind of loose, little loose flowing. Like, oh, maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. But if I kind of say, I really determine I'm going to really try this. So, and here's the doing something different. It's hard. It's hard to make a new path. Okay? So if you notice that every time this happens, there goes that little voice, you did it again. So I've had that voice a million times. Let me look at that voice for a moment. It doesn't really serve anybody. It doesn't serve me. In your case, it doesn't serve your kids, your family. It doesn't really serve anybody, And then I observe, it's a habit, it's just a habit, And then I have my little, did anybody do the bubbles? And then it's a little bubble, little cloud in the sky, and here comes that voice, you're worthless, you never do anything right, and that makes me feel depressed, and, oh, here it comes again, It really has no essence if you really want to analyze the thought. So I do it that way every time. What if I just either let the thought go this one time? I know it's still kind of circling out there subtly. Let the thought go and just said, I'm a really good mom. This is the best I can do, actually. I'm okay. So trying something different. So it's hard. Some of the patterns, and even if you want to put it into language, you're not familiar yet with it. So it feels odd. It feels kind of weird. And it's unknown, so it's scary. I don't know if it's okay to feel good about myself. Right? Because a lot of people in our culture don't. And there's something about that misery loves company. You kind of feel, I have a thing at the center, this is one of my things, is I worry about money for the center. This is a practical thing many people are involved with, for their home, mortgage, to feed their kids, whatever it is. This is one of the commodities in our culture. So there's also difference between worry and concern. So I'll put it this way, I have concern, and it's part of my job to make sure there's enough money for Mill Rate the Center. That's what a director does. Okay? Sometimes it goes into worry. So I get a little bit more spun out. The worry is not constructive. Okay, the concern is constructive, meaning I plan things with other people there to make sure, we've got kind of catches and balances to make sure that quarterly I'm on track, that we're on track, and I've got, this thing, and I'm trying to do, that's concern, that's, okay, responsibility. And then sometimes I'm up at night worrying about it. So this is one of my tapes. If I don't worry, it'll be disastrous. This went through me with every center that I ran. If I don't worry about it and think about it, it'll be, it's just a habit. So I notice when it comes up now, and I'll just go, oh yeah, there's that thought. Well, the worry isn't really doing anything for it. Just an old habit in the mind that I have to feel this way. I'm supposed to feel this way. Now more and more I let it go. And just say, am I doing everything I'm supposed to be doing about it? Okay, so tomorrow I'll call that person I should have called today. I'll call that list of people. Okay, that's it. Then it's done. Like that. And then you can send that little negative, distractive thought. I sometimes visualize it out the door. I shut the door. the door to, never come back again door type of thing. Anyway, you can try. So just a few things. So what I also wanted to go into, okay, so here's some, we talked a little bit, some general ways, yes.
Who was Rumi? You mentioned...
Rumi is an ancient poet, I think, I forget, from the Sufi tradition.
Sufi, yeah.
Beautiful poet. He has some beautiful, beautiful things. I recommend looking at a book of his. Enlightened being, quite a, I think, highly realized being. We started to talk a little bit about general ways of dealing with anxiety and depression. Okay, the first one, and we mentioned this overall, but I didn't give you the 4 in this order. The first one is basic mindfulness and self-awareness, which we've been talking about. Observe. Mindfulness and self-awareness. For instance, you notice anxiety. Suddenly you feel anxious. This is how it starts. You feel really anxious. I sometimes imagine like all the doors and windows are shutting and you're kind of like, And you notice it, okay? And sometimes if you're able to observe more, you'll start to get skilled where you'll start to notice it beginning to arise before it's full-blown, which is interesting. Like, now I do notice, I can see it, suddenly something starting to manifest before it's fully there. That's very, very helpful because then you can start to make precautions before you're absolutely wrapped up in the emotion, in the delusion. But if you can, suddenly you're fully into it. I just feel so depressed. Here it is again. I don't want to get out of bed. You get that feeling behind the eyes, that cloud kind of comes down. Right? Every color you look at, like in depression, is kind of dulled. Nothing's fun anymore. You don't even want to hear about people kind of trying to, oh, let's go do this. You're like, no. Depression just talks you out of any of that, okay? So you're just aware. This is what's going on in the mind, okay? Because you're aware, because you observe, you will be able to take control more of your mind. Okay, the beginning is the awareness. A lot of people on the planet aren't aware. They just feel that way. They don't want to fix it. It can't be fixed. I'm always like this. This is how it is. I'm just an anxious person, they'll say to me. I'm just always anxious. I'm always depressed. I'm a depressed person. Like, forever, all permanent, for all time. Like that. So they're not really interested in observing it. What triggers it? Who are you around when it happens? Is there something that happened yesterday? You can often trace there's something, Granted, there's also like more pervasive ones that have been going on for 30 years, like we were talking about yesterday. That's common as well. Recognize the habit. And if you can't trace it in this life, Buddhism has a belief in past lives. So again, we have purification practices, you do. So I talked about those yesterday, but okay. So when you have the mindfulness and awareness, this is point number 1 of general ways of dealing with delusion, particularly anxiety and depression, through regular meditation practice, your mind normally can start to apply antidotes. That we're going to talk about some antidotes to those specifically. So I really would recommend, in the observation and to create more mindfulness and awareness, get a meditation practice going. You don't have to be any great yogi or yogini. I mentioned my preference is a book called How to Meditate. I think they sell it here. How to Meditate by Kathleen McDonald. It's basic. It's great. I know people that use it at all different stages of their meditation. I still refer to that book. She goes right from the beginning. Motivation, posture. It's all there. It's easy to read. There's lots of meditation guides. So if you don't like hers, get another one. I know hers is a really valid guide, and what she has in there are visualizations. She has white light meditation. She has meditation on love. She has ones with mantras, emptiness. They're all everything. It would cover just a general range of meditations. There's not just one kind of meditation. She starts with the breath. And in the book, you just can open the book and you read a few sentences. hold the book there and you can just meditate. Think about that. Then go in a little bit deeper, then read another 2 sentences of what she's saying. That's how I started to meditate. I didn't know what to meditate on, so have a book. You don't just sit down and all of a sudden it comes. You have a book, a guide, read a couple sentences. FPMT, all their Discovering Buddhism courses have accompanying meditations. They can all be downloaded from the web. They're usually 1 or 2 pages long. That's it. Page like this, have it in front of you, read through, close your eyes a little bit, sit, make sure you have the right posture, reflect on that for a little bit, read the next couple lines. Spend if you have 10 minutes, if you have 20 minutes, that's it. So what you'll find is the little pockets I mentioned to you, morning, evening, I've already gone over what those are, we did one this morning already. I find with those, if you can keep those going consistently, and sometimes I know it may not be every day, if you can keep it going consistently, you'll notice some calm starting to interact with the anxiety when it comes up, or the depression. There'll suddenly be some level of reality. I'm not an entirely bad person, right? You know? Like all of a sudden, that's mindful from mindfulness and awareness. Does it make sense? So that's number 1, general way of dealing. Please really try that. I know it's really hard to try to meditate. But again, start with 5 or 10 minutes in the morning, 5 or 10 minutes at night. You're going to see some benefit. So what people tend to do is then they extend the period a little bit. Because they like it. Make a little place in your house, I said. Doesn't have to be elaborate. A little corner of a room. Safe, calm, get a cushion of a right size, whatever kinds, experiment with types of cushions, corners of cushions. And that's your little place to come home. Here. Like that. You have this, and eventually you like to sit there. You want to go to the place. Sometimes you miss a day. Start the next day. Sometimes you miss 2 days. Sometimes you don't get to it for a week. Go back to it. But what you do find is if you don't keep it somewhat consistent, it's always hard to get started. It's always and then you look in the corner and you see and you go, oh, and then you hate it. Right? So these are common things. So laugh at yourself, laugh with it. It's very hard to get this practice started. Our cultures are going the opposite way. Okay, so dance with it. We have to dance with our spiritual practice. It is not easy to practice in this day and age. It's very, very hard. It's easier for me to go out and get a violent video game. It would be easier to do that. I'm just amazed. What did I see recently? I think I must have been maybe at my dad's. I watched some TV. This is where it really gets. We don't have TV at the center, but I'm so glad, right? Even though I think you can get anything from your computer, but at my dad's sometimes I'll watch there, and some of the ads based on what you're watching. First of all, there's so much violence on TV. I just every commercial, everything we turned, it was just one violent show after another. So really, I thought, no wonder there's problems here. You know, I don't know. There's a lot of. It just feels like that kind of thing. So protect your mind. Be careful what you watch, what you read, because it all goes in and leaves an imprint of. Okay, so so I was just saying the things about these video games. I didn't even know about them really, but now they're advertised all over television. And one of them I said to my father, is that a movie? And he's like, no. And my brother said, no, it's a video game for adults to blow people up. If you can't really go to Afghanistan, it's okay. You can do it on your computer.
Kids play them all the time.
Yep. Yep. I remember my nephews as teenagers, and then I went up, my sister said, tell them to come down for dinner, go up, tell them to stop the computer. And I could hear them as I was walking up the stairs spouting profanity because of the video game, Yeah, some really, nasty stuff. So, it's a shame, somehow, our culture. So, at least we have a little pocket of positivity here. You create this at Dharma centers, like that. So, here's number 2, general antidote, okay? Remember the nature of the mind. I said this yesterday. Remember the nature of the mind. What does this mean? What it means is, what are the 2 qualities I said yesterday of the mind? Mind has 2 qualities. Clarity and awareness. Clarity and awareness, yep. So basically what that means is Our mind, which I will equate with consciousness, it's the same, okay? It's not our brain. And again, the mind, as I said yesterday, is not physical. It has no form, no smell, no shape. So it's not the brain. The brain is a physical organ. And it's hard for us to understand the beginninglessness and the endlessness of this mind, this continuity of consciousness, okay? Its nature is that it is clear and knowing. Even though our minds feel busy, it's not their nature. Simply clear and knowing. That's the mind. Okay? So when I get stressed, and suddenly you've been plagued for 30 years, let's say with depression, that's not the nature of your mind. It is simply a habit. It's an adventitious delusion. Adventitious means you can get rid of it permanently. The depression. It's not in the nature of your mind. Your mind is a clear, spacious luminosity that is aware of things. That's it. So sometimes I'll just notice, like, wow, I have a lot of anger in my mind right now. Or I'm feeling really irritated. But I know that's not me. And also, those experiences, even if it's a long-term depression, it's impermanent.
Mm-hmm.
There was a moment, there was some time before that, right? Can you remember that?
No, but I mean, there's pockets in the middle where, I don't feel guilty.
You don't feel it, so, and you don't feel guilty, right? So it's like, that's there. So all you're trying to do is increase those spaces, which are more connected to your mind, the real nature of your mind. So to know that that's there, then it has to be impermanent, all of it. It doesn't stay, and it changes all the time, too. Yes?
I just think what you did with Ted is just so parallel to, you acknowledge the fact that he's the same. He's acknowledging in yourself that you are mind, essentially clear and just aware. The same thing you did with Ted, which is just acknowledging that, not only that he wants to be, to suffer, but there's compassion in actually acknowledging at the root that that he is the same.
He wants the same thing I want.
But there's also an essential clarity and awareness within him as well.
Yes, yeah.
Acknowledgement of it.
Well, I didn't go to the next step with Ted. So if somebody irritates you that causes your stress or your depression or your guilt or these things, is the next step, which I also did with him and I didn't mention, is that he and I have Buddha nature, both of us. I mentioned that yesterday.
Yeah.
Buddha nature, the seed of all your goodness, compassion, loving kindness. Fundamentally good. Fundamentally you're good.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentally you're good in Buddhism. Yeah. He and I. Your jerk at work, whatever's causing you a problem, fundamentally you both have Buddha nature. Isn't that interesting?
Right.
Now I have a second thing in common with him. So I had to kind of really wake up, open my eyes and say, yeah, it's really not him. It's that I got a wall in my mind, and now I get to blame him, and he's the problem. But you could take him away, my obstacle's still there, then whatever lawyer you're going to put in, there'd be another problem. Do you ever have people, as soon as I get the new job, and I get away from this boss, and I got, everything's going to be okay, right? So you switch jobs, or the boss got fired, and a new boss comes in, and there'll be another problem, because your mind is still there. I've seen people move, switch schools, switch jobs, and their mind, just so happens to go with them. Interesting, huh? And then they'll come back to me and they'll go, you won't believe it, but there's this guy at work now. And I'll say, that's interesting, because there was a guy at work before. That's interesting. Do you find that interesting? Sometimes they don't want to say, no, it's this guy. I'm like, that's what you told me about your boss. No, that was different. Okay. And sometimes you have to wait for people to catch up till they're... But some people say, oh yeah. And okay. Well, there's great practice like that, because you can't escape from the mind. Mind goes with you. So the best thing we can do is we can only control our mind. You can't control Ted, the jerk at work. You want to control these people, But you can't. If I can control my mind like that. What if Ted were Rinpoche? I would have rushed off to wash his cup. I would have been honored.
Yeah.
you know, wow, she gave me this cup, look at all the mold. So, you know, really, I would have cherished it. I would have totally cherished it. So why not, you know, there's one Lama, Hindu teacher, Neem Karoli Baba, Hindu teacher from Brindavan. He passed away years ago. He was just love incarnate, the things I read about him. I went to his ashram, he had a consort, his wife, anyway, he was supposed to be extraordinary. I think he was Ram Dass's guru. And they wrote a book about him. The students put quotes of books. I think there's a book coming out about Lama Yeshe like this, but there was all these quotes, and the book's called Miracle of Love, I think. It's a beautiful book. It's an old book, Miracle of Love. And he used to say, see God in everything. And I was like, because I missed an opportunity. You know, you can miss opportunities, but see God in everything. So there are challenges, and there are people that you feel this is not an appropriate thing for them to say to me or ask me. Yes, you do have to practically engage. You're not just a doormat like that. But are there times when I'm making a fuss over something and I could actually stretch and make this harmonious? And I'm not being a codependent and I'm not letting somebody abuse me. And there are times we could just, and driving's a great example. You know? Again, I mentioned, if that car that's trying to get in and you don't want to let them in, and sometimes we have issues about cars, don't we? Certain cars. I have judgments. Well, I used to have more. I used to have more judgments about types of cars people drove. Like I said to Geshe-la the other day, we got into my car to drive to this lunch, and we both have Toyotas. Geshe-la, you know. So I got into my car, and he goes, "This is nice. I like the seats." You know. Anyway, he got in, and I said, "Geshe-la, this is the Mahayana. This car, you know, greater vehicle." And then he looked at me, and he looked a little confused, like, you know. And I said, "It's a Toyota," you know. And then he laughed, and so I used to have these judgments. I got very humbled by, anyway, I had judgments about large SUVs. People that drove large SUVs when the gas prices were, you know, horrible. They're still kind of horrible, but I didn't understand it. Why do you need a large SUV unless you live in an area that needs a four-wheel drive? I just didn't get it. So I'm at my dad's, and there's this guy, you know, and anyway, I think he got in front of me, anyway, I had this whole thing about him. Jerk, you know. I'm sure he voted for Bush twice, you know. I mean, I had all my, even though some of you may have, sorry, but I was just full of it. And just by chance, he and I stopped at the same convenience store to get something at one, you know, or gas or something, and I got out, and there he was, and he was a rescue worker. So the whole back of the SUV was full of oxygen, thermal blankets, like all this stuff. And somehow we started talking, and then I was a little bit like, wah, wah. You know, boy, was I wrong. You know, he was really like a really good person. And somehow I don't remember how we started talking, but so you don't know, but you get a judgment, and then this person wants to get in. You're not going to let them in because, you know, you don't like them. But what if they turn around and it's a friend of yours? In a second, you'd let them in. You'd be so happy to let them in. One time driving in Santa Cruz with a student, she was driving, somebody tried to get in, and she was just about to give somebody the finger in the car. I remember I was kind of like, and I said to her, where are you going with that finger? What are you going to do there? You know, and she started laughing. She's like, just a reaction, she's like, sorry. And then she turned around with somebody she knew. And then she was like, hi. You know? So you don't know, so why don't you see God in everybody? Maybe you have an opportunity to let somebody in. I always loved that. So the nature of the mind, clear, non-physical, it is a stream of mental events that rise and pass away. That's your mind. So here comes depression, here comes guilt, worthlessness. It's impermanent. It changes moment to moment. Your mind is ever-flowing thoughts. So it's like right now I seem to have a lot of this particular thought coming in, this anxiety, but it's changing, and it's actually really not my mind. It's just something that comes in because there was a previous moment of that previous experience. Sometimes you have many previous experiences of that. So there's long-term depression, long-term anxiety. Sometimes it comes from a previous life of that. And you can do something about it. Absolutely, you can. So the beginning is, part of this would be these mental events, They appear, they disappear. They come and they go. They are not permanent. They're not fixed entities. We give them power. There's some people that really hold strongly to it. They want to be the victim. They want to be the depressed person. You know, people in your lives, they're always, oh, you know, oh, sorry. Yeah, so people, that's how they identify with that. You know, and if it's a negative thing, this is your life. Why? You know, you have a great life right now. Why be stuck in some of this gunk, okay? So that's what I meant about seeing them as bubbles. When the thought gets going, I'm worthless, I'm useless, I do not, you know, is pop the bubbles, or see them as clouds in the sky. Your mind could be equated with the sky. Clear, the sky is spacious, luminous, okay? And clouds come into being, they change, they molt, and they pass away, okay? They come and go like that. Also, what about a dream? You know how you have dreams and how real they are? So a little bit, maybe my depression, yeah, it's just kind of like a dream. You know I'm experiencing it now, but I really don't need to hold any more tightly to it. The anxiety. Okay. Rainbows. See it like a rainbow. And then also you can look at waves that rise and fall in the sea. Sometimes they're huge and they knock you over. Sometimes a little thing and you float along, right? And then it goes right back into the sea. And sometimes on a lake, you could notice ripples on the lake. You throw a big rock in, big ripples. And then it subsides and it goes back to the stillness of the lake, unless there's a breeze, right? And also the breeze comes, like when you have a big emotion happening, and it agitates the surface of the lake. And then the breeze changes, still. So these are just images, metaphors, analogies of things to help you when it comes in your mind. See if you can interact and bring one of those in and say, that's right, this is just like a dream. You know, I know I feel like this right now, but it's really not going to last. It's not always like this. I have other moments. Just try to let it go. And then I mentioned about de-identifying with the emotion. De-identifying. There are people that want to hang on to the guilt, the depression, the anxiety. But again, it's just passing through your mind temporarily, not all the time. Okay? So the more you can de-identify, here's a way of de-identifying. Instead of I'm an angry person, oh, wow, I have a lot of anger in my mind right now. You know? Some people like, I'm always depressed. I'm a depressed person. You know, it's kind of how I identify myself. I'm depressed. People know me as being depressed. You know, instead of, wow, I've had a lot of depression in my mind for a while. Sometimes I feel really depressed, and there's a lot of depression in my mind. But it's just passing through the mind. So you don't have ownership of it. Possible to say that, do you think? You know, just watching. Well, I have a lot of anxiety in my mind right now. Like, look how agitated my mind appears to be right now, based on this anxiety. I know it's not really the nature of my mind, but look how agitated the surface has become like that. So that gives the anxiety, that gives the depression less power over you. Okay? And it takes strength of mind to do it, I know. But if you can get it a little, decrease the power of the emotion, it increases and empowers you. Okay, then as a result of that, you're better able to start to deal with it objectively, to say what's going on. So here's number 3, being non-judgmental. What's that?
I just said it's so hard.
Yes, being non-judgmental. Okay?
Or yourself, or...
Yes, so here's the thing. You may notice that you tend to have certain thoughts and emotions, okay? And you like these thoughts, but you don't like these thoughts, okay? And so what will happen is it leads to attachment and grasping, aversion and rejection, and when your mind gets caught up on it, gets caught up in those patterns, it's not peaceful, okay? So instead of this, what about cultivating a sense of equanimity? A non-judgmental, loving awareness and acceptance of whatever arises in your mind. See, so what's happening is, here comes anxiety. And I go, oh no, oh, there it is again. And people that have depression and have conquered depression, they're always afraid it's going to come up again. You know, it's kind of in the back of them, like, I'm afraid I'm going to go back in that period. So as soon as you have one day that's a little bit off. Let me repeat this because Bob, we'll include Bob in this as well. So, we're talking about being non-judgmental. So I was saying what happens is when a big affliction, mental affliction comes up in your mind, and you say, okay, what happens is we tend to, if it's guilt and depression and anxiety, immediately you go, oh, I hate that, I don't want that, or there's fear. So I mentioned, somebody yesterday mentioned they got over depression, but they always had this fear it's going to be back. Then you have one off day, and you go, oh no, I'm going to be sinking back into that state again. So what you do is you have aversion, and then you have a good day and you get all elated, attachment. So instead of doing that, why not cultivate more equanimity of whatever arises, it's okay. Whatever arises, there's loving awareness and acceptance of whatever arises in my mind. So here comes the dark bank of rain clouds of depression. I'm okay, I'm doing the best I can do. You know, I don't have any great aversion about it, or grasping at it, or here's a little moment when my mind right now feels pretty good. I'm noticing it's really not really feeling very guilty right now. And then you get attached to that. It becomes another excitement. So it's more like, oh, I'm not feeling particularly guilty right now. Okay, that's nice. You know? And now I'm feeling a little bit stressed. I've got this thing happening and I actually feel pretty anxious. I'm still okay, and I care about myself. You see what I mean? There's just more of a balance, you know, without these great ups and downs and equanimity. And then we mentioned yesterday these words, acceptance. Can you just accept sometimes that you suffer from depression, that you have depression in your mind? You know, and you're doing what you can do about it, but sometimes that acceptance gently releases this, how much bigger we make it, how bigger we make the affliction. You know, when you get anxious, if you don't kind of accept that sometimes in samsara there's anxiety and depression, and sometimes, maybe you could say I'm plagued by it a little bit more, I have it going through my mind more, and if you don't accept that, you get more stressed as they come up. You know, why this? Oh no, it's happening again. Oh, you know. Does that make sense? The non-judgmental acceptance. I want to talk about that in a minute. Yes.
So how is equanimity different from the but that we were talking about earlier, where we say,
you know, I did this really good thing and I'm happy about it and I'm rejoicing, but, you know, equanimity or non-judgmental, I would think, you know, I shouldn't rejoice about something that I do really good because afterwards I'm going to come down off of it, so I'll try and, you know, tip the scales a little bit, so I'm really high on one moment, so I'm going to try and say but, and bring myself down a little bit.
I think rejoicing isn't overly elated excitement and attachment. It's just like, how wonderful, that was great. Glad I did that. So why put a but on it that colors it negatively then? That's like a judgment, the but I messed up again. But something, just like, great, I drove more compassionately yesterday and I actually felt calmer for that, period. You know, it's no great, like I'm not grasping onto that again, I'm just noticing, nice, that was nice, like that. So it doesn't get overly excited is what I'm saying. Where it was when attachment unhinges and grabs a hold of it then. Oh, well that was great. I did so great yesterday. I've got it now, I've got it down now. I'm sorted. And then the next time you mess up, you're even harder on yourself. That's what I've noticed in my own mind and other people.
So I get the point of equanimity. I see the value in cultivating that, but I don't know how to get there. I don't know how to cultivate equanimity, how to
be non-judgmental?
Well, it takes time. It takes time. I mean, if you want to, are you speaking just about yourself or with others, or?
I'm speaking about myself. For sure.
Yeah, so it just takes time to be gentle with yourself. So here's a couple words: acceptance and forgiveness. I would add on to this non-judgmental experience. And this says acceptance, some of my notes. So is, over the years, I think from life experiences, many of you know, there's things I accept about myself that are flawed. But we have character traits, and I'm a human being, I'm not perfect. So I'm working on it, and I accept that. And so when I make a mistake from that place, I forgive myself. First of all, I'll take a step back, I'm aware what happened, and I go, oh wow, that, I have mindfulness, and I go, well, I kind of blew that. I said the wrong thing the other day, and so I look at that and I go, well, that came because of that, and that was because of that, and I got to work on that. I have to work on that. So that happened, and I accept that sometimes I do that when this happens, and I forgive myself. And now I'm going to move on, because that's the best I can do. Does that make sense? So for me, that would be a sense of equanimity. There's gentleness to me, there's an equal state of mind for myself, a balance in my mind. But it takes time, over time, to cultivate. Gentleness with yourself, where it comes from.
I think for me, I think I'm a very arrogant person, and I'm very proud of myself too often. So I try to counteract that by constantly thinking, no, what you just did is not that great of a thing. It's not that wonderful of a thing, and try to lessen that. So I'm not sure exactly how to achieve the non-arising of the pride and the arrogance in the first place.
So what Buddhism doesn't necessarily, it doesn't repress what's coming up, and it also doesn't smash it down, like which would be that experience. So let me go into a little bit more of, in the delusions, of some of the antidotes, because it'll give you a little bit more sense of, because there's antidotes we apply more gently, and that's why one of these would be, so let's say I'm trying to think with arrogance. First of all, physical things to do for arrogance are prostrations. That's one of the antidotes. Prostrations, you lower yourself on the ground and you're bowing down in a sense, so it's very humbling to do a lot of prostrations like that, for people that like something like that, I mean, another thing would be more gently to, I observe my mind, I'm realizing, I'm feeling that I clearly know this stuff more than these people, and I've got it all sorted, and they're kind of stupid. And so I'm just aware, I'm watching that from my mindfulness and awareness, right? And then I realize that the nature of my mind is really not arrogance, and it's the arrogance that prevents me from making progress. So, okay, I'm aware of that as well. And right now I just have arrogance in my mind. I just have a previous moment of it, previous pride like that. So that's all it comes from, but it's actually temporary. I've had moments when I haven't felt arrogant, and it is one of the root delusions, pride. So I'm just acknowledging that. It doesn't serve me very well. Like when you feel that way, you're probably not that happy, that you feel like you're better than other people like that. And it doesn't serve other people. So slowly through that level, accepting that sometimes I have arrogance in my mind. It happens to be one of my things, you could say, like that. We all have our own we all have many delusions, but some people know they have different ones, for other things. So that's one that you've identified, which I think is great, you have identified. And then you can talk to the delusion. It's another thing people do, is you notice it as its own kind of separate thing, and so really, what do I need you for? What's the point of your thinking that I'm greater than everyone, that I know what's right? Sometimes it helps dissolve it. And I would think the acceptance, and then forgiving yourself when you've had moments like that you've acted out of that place. There's also many different types of meditations you can do that help. Vajrasattva is a great one to purify, things like that. Meditating that just as I want to be happy and don't want to suffer, so does this person that I feel better, more superior to, so does this person. You want the same thing, and you both have Buddha nature. Do you know people's minds? Are you clairvoyant? So you don't know that they might have way more realizations than you. I'm really not accurate. If you understand emptiness, then that would cut all the delusions. Emptiness is the main antidote to all of them. You start to meditate on emptiness, you realize there's no I there to feel arrogant at all. And things like that. A few things. Yeah, it's interesting, arrogance. It's the few people I'm around that have that. That's their big delusion, and it's challenging sometimes to be around. Like, it's somebody close to me, and they're just always right, and they got the answer, and they're very opinionated. And sometimes I'm like, and they'll just come blurting out with something. This is how it is, and I'm like, like it's amusing, I'm just like, and it's a very rigid place of mind. You suffer because the rigid space of their mind that things have to be like this because they know, and I think so much suffering these people suffer. So you can be free. You can be so much happier. That's another thing. Is just thinking, like, if you can notice how the constructs it makes for you and how it keeps you imprisoned. You can almost visualize a cage around yourself when you notice it rise, and slowly what you want to do is dissolve the cage through compassion for yourself. Because often some arrogance comes out of incredible low self-esteem and insecurity. I'm not saying your case, but many people have that because you can also have from low self-esteem and from somebody verbally abusing you your whole life or something, you either end up feeling worthless or you end up overly confident. There's usually two responses to that, because you kind of overcompensate. I'm going to get out from under this, and don't tell me I'm worthless, because I'm not, So it's even just acknowledging, and that's part of the acceptance, is like I accept and acknowledge some of these faults and things and patterns that I chose to come back into in this life. I'm not blaming anyone, I'm just saying, yep, I made a deal, I got these things to work with, so I really want to work with them really well. And then I can start to transcend. But a lot of it is acceptance when I mess up from this delusion, and then I forgive myself. Because more of that gentleness with myself, then I'm going to be more gentle. Those are a few things like that. Somebody else had a question back there?
I just wanted you to repeat the phrase that you said, whatever arises, something. I just was asking you to repeat the phrase.
Yes. So it's talk about it's better to cultivate a sense of equanimity, which I would say is a non-judgmental, loving awareness and acceptance of whatever is arising in the mind at any given time. And think about that stuff. Think about that exact phrase in relation to guilt, depression, anxiety, arrogance. Think about that phrase of, okay, you could say non-judgmental. You're laying a trip on yourself, right from but how about loving awareness? How about that?
Exactly.
Loving awareness. Can you love yourself when you're arrogant? I can try to love myself when I'm angry. Anger's more my thing, sometimes, one of my things. So what happens is, when you have anger in your mind, this is the problem. There's no space for love in your mind at the same time. That's tricky. So often these big delusions, you don't have room for something else in there. Okay? But when it finishes, and it always finishes, and suddenly I'm into a new space, because I don't really hold on to the anger that much, but I'll get irritated about something, and then there's a new space, and I'll look and I'll remember myself angry, and then I love that person. I'll think, wow, she suffers in that space. Because if I see somebody else angry like that, I would have compassion for them. So what about yourself? So that loving awareness is very important, and a lot of us aren't familiar with that. That's kind of, arrogance doesn't like that. Anger hates that. Doesn't like those spaces of gentle love. Most of the delusions don't like loving awareness, because it's one of the main antidotes, love. Huge antidote, especially a big antidote to anger. Like that. But it solves, the Beatles were right, love is all there is, really, right? It solves a lot of things, okay? So don't forget that loving, like you say, well, non-judgmental, equanimity, non-judgmental. There's loving awareness that's part of that. And then the other thing is acceptance. Can you accept your flaws? I didn't for years. I was miserable. You know, I had to be perfect, and I never was. So, what are you setting yourself up for? So it's again, what I mentioned yesterday, the Sharon Salzberg is, you know, she knocks over a glass, it breaks on the floor, and, you know, a thing in her mind says, or I think she said it out loud, "You're so stupid, and I love you." That's the acceptance, you know. Wow, I just got really irritated, and I'm okay. You know. And it might even be that, and that's okay, and it's not really that being irritated or angry or guilty or depressed or anxious or arrogant is okay, but I'm doing the best I can do. Why? Because I observed it. I'm going to try to apply an antidote and do something different, and I'm going to try to, I commit myself to making that a behavioral pattern for the future. It's possible. It's really possible. So here's the fourth general antidote, a general way of dealing with these things, is simple Tonglen meditation. Now this isn't often for new people, okay? Tonglen means giving and taking. Giving and taking, it's very radical. Why is it radical? Well, what you're giving and taking, okay, think of a problem you're experiencing. Your arrogance, your guilt, depression, anxiety. We all suffer from these things, okay? Okay? You're not the only one on the planet suffering from this. There's many, many, many people suffering from these things. And many of them are responding and reacting in much worse ways than you are. People kill from some of these delusions. Okay? We're not doing that. Okay? We're trying to do something about it. Okay, so many people like that, experiencing the same problem. So first of all, we could generate some compassion for them, because we really know how they feel. If you haven't suffered from a certain delusion, you might not really know how that feels for somebody, but, you know, so have some compassion. Try to open your heart. Think about them. Sometimes you'll read something in the news, or you'll see something on TV, or hear about something like that. Okay? And then the other thing is mentally accept your problem. Okay? And with the wish, by my accepting this problem, you can just have this thought in your mind. By my accepting this problem that I have, may all the other people and the beings on this planet be free from experiencing that problem. That's a simple way of doing Tonglen. You just think in your mind, you know, I have this problem, and there's all these people, I really feel for them. Compassion is wishing them to be free of that problem. And by my accepting that I have this right now, I really want to generate a wish that they're free of that problem. I'll take it on myself. It doesn't mean you're going to have more arrogance and more depression. In the actual meditation, we did a little of this yesterday, you visualize it as a constricted knot at your heart. So there is your poison. There's your depression, there's your arrogance, there's your sadness, there's your anxiety, your anger, your attachment, constricted knot at your heart center. You know, and you can visualize light coming in, melting it, purifying, or what you can do is place these other beings around you. It may be one person that you visualize that you know also is really, really depressed. So I find it much better to start personally with someone. Put them in front of you, think about how it messes up their lives. You know? And when they exhale, you're going to inhale their depression. It comes in, it doesn't harm you, it harms your depression in here. Eradicates. Where does the depression come from? Self-cherishing, self-grasping. You know, not knowing correctly. Not knowing things correctly, and then by that mistake, you know, overly compensating, cherishing myself too much. So I just acknowledge that. That's a human condition. We're all the same. We all have self-cherishing. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep chipping away, taking on their suffering, chipping away, taking on their arrogance, and it destroys my arrogance, my depression, my guilt, my pain, my anxiety, and then from a place of deep peace and freedom, I offer them all the happiness, freedom from arrogance, freedom And just visualize it coming out. Whatever colored light rays you'd like to visualize, you exhale that. Some people do circular breathing, so the right nostril takes in, the left nostril offers them. They take it in, they breathe it in, they're free. And you just do that for however long you can. And then imagine them peaceful, serene, free. They can dissolve back into the space. And then just sit for a moment in the calmness you might feel, what you experience. And dedicate the merit. So let's try some of that. Let's try a little Tonglen, then we're going to take a little break. Just sit comfortably. So just lightly close your eyes. And first bring your awareness to your breath and just settle the mind. We're going to just do some Tonglen with ourselves. So imagine a replica of yourself is seated across from you right now. Just visualize as best as you can. And just imagine the various delusions you suffer from, or whatever the biggest one is, how it makes you suffer. And as you recognize this, try to generate as much compassion from yourself seated here in the room towards this front visualization of you. That wouldn't it be amazing if you could be free of this delusion? And also know that there are so many other beings on the planet that suffer exactly like this. So maybe in our decreasing that in ourselves, even in the front visualization of yourself, you could help remove that from all other beings on the planet. Just consider that for a moment. And imagine right now, you seated here in the room at your heart center is a constricted knot of this delusion. Think of how it makes you feel sometimes. The tightness you might feel. How many obstacles it creates. And as you inhale, you seated here in the room, imagine coming in your right nostril. You're going to take that delusion from your front visualization of yourself, and it leaves the front visualization through the left nostril. It doesn't harm you at all, it only harms that delusion, that tight, restricted knot at your heart center. Instantly destroying it. It forms again and again, and we continue to purify. You can visualize whatever colored light rays you'd like that represent that delusion. Various images of how it makes you act, whatever like that. And then once you're free and you're purified, on each exhalation, from a place of deeper spaciousness and peace, you're going to offer all of that to your front visualization, filling them up with happiness and bliss. And again, visualize whatever represents that to you. Just do your best. Tonglen, giving and taking. So just imagine your front visualization does experience a deeper sense of peace and happiness. And imagine them slowly dissolving into a golden drop of light. Imagine that drop melting into your forehead, you have also reduced not only your self-cherishing, but whatever particular delusion you were focused on. Just allow yourself to rest in that state of awareness. Notice any things that arise. Please relax. Slowly open your eyes. Any comments? Is it helpful? It takes time though to do. It's a very strong meditation. That's just one way to do it. I think it's hard to do. We do Tonglen with all beings, but it's too hard to think of all beings if you haven't really dealt with yourself, I think. It's nice to start with yourself. So we're going to take a break. Yes?
I was going to say, I find it helpful because I find it a lot easier to be kinder to other people than to myself, so that it kind of gets it going.
That's why we start with ourselves, yeah. Yeah. That's a good comment. So we're going to take a break, just 5 or 10 minutes. So what I want you to do instead of the blah blah, okay, is you're going to take a break with your delusion. So you're going to basically get them tea, as if they're personified. If you have to go to the bathroom, you know, they're going to the bathroom with you, and just observe a little bit of, you know, you got your arm in arm with your depression or your anxiety. You're going to move through space with them, kind of focus like that. So we'll take a short break. So, how was your break with your delusion?
It was actually very nice to have it separate for a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because it is really separate.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's interesting. And also, I find sometimes it feels silly, like it dissolves a little bit, that it gives them less power, where I'm kind of like, what is it? Like, it's really this separate thing, and sometimes a little interesting exercise to try. I want to go into some more specific things for fear, worry, arrogance, because just these are things that came up, depression, anxiety. Okay, here are antidotes to pride. Are you ready? More antidotes, okay? I put these all together from different things I've been doing. I have a lot of notes about where pride comes from and how it makes you feel. You know, it's a mental factor. Okay, pride's one of the 6 root delusions. So if you want to analyze, I mentioned this yesterday, analyze your delusion. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but pride is a mental factor that grasps at a wrong conception of an I, a self, a mine. It exaggerates their importance, and then leads us to feel high and superior to others. So you just want to, analyze what is it actually. Sometimes that can be helpful. We feel pride in relation to many things, and sometimes it can be difficult to detect. But certain signs in our attitudes, our behavior, indicate that we have pride in our minds. So it could be critical, judgmental of others. We feel unhappy when we're not number one, when we're not perfect. We feel jealous of those who do better, that have more. We feel angry when we don't receive the respect we think we deserve. You know, there's many different moltings of this. You get angry when you're criticized. And you can also feel depressed about mistakes and faults and want to be perfect and things like that. Okay? So I want to differentiate pride from self-esteem and self-confidence. They're different. They're very different. Pride is a delusion. Self-esteem, I'm talking about healthy self-esteem, and self-confidence is healthy, and it's actually important in your spiritual practice. You do need confidence to progress along the path. So the difference is that pride involves feeling superior to, looking down upon others, whereas a healthy sense of self-esteem or self-confidence involves recognizing and acknowledging our good qualities, our achievements, without going to the extent of feeling egotistical, arrogant, and thinking we're better than others. So you need to feel confident in your potential to develop yourselves on a spiritual path and attain higher states such as enlightenment. You do need to have some confidence, but it's different than pride. Okay? And then you can imagine all the reasons, you know, what I just mentioned, why pride is difficult. So here's some antidotes. Reflect on the source of whatever it is you take pride in, that you feel, you know, proud of, and then realize how you are dependent on others. So a lot of times we think we're independent and we're separate from everyone else, but the very fact that you exist is because you have a body that was created by your parents, and all the good things in life that came out of their kindness, teachers teaching you, friends helping you, supporting you. The fact that you're in this room is due to the kindness of others that are presenting these teachings, that are supporting the center in all different ways, whether it's a sound system and a videotape and a camera and many things, putting the cushions out, thinking what temperature the room would be, the lightings, you know, they went to a lot of thought to do this. And basically every part of our lives are like that. You know, sometimes I think about, this is something we take for granted, infrastructure, the roads. And the fact that there's paved roads. I literally, in February, was in Kathmandu, Nepal. Due to a lack of some paved roads in areas, I really couldn't transport myself to different places. And when I went outside, because of the level of dust because of that, and the cabs, the little taxis don't have shocks and things, I actually couldn't go. I was sick to my stomach one day because I just couldn't deal with another bouncing taxi ride over dust, and I couldn't breathe, and I never felt that way before there. It was just awful. And so here it's like, you know, okay, there's potholes after the winter, but basically that's kind that they built roads, and you know, so it starts to humble you to think of all the things that are created by others. You know, how dependent we are. You can go to Whole Foods, you can go to your supermarket, right? But there's an amazing amount of food in these stores. It's overly distracting sometimes for me. But like in Nepal in the mountains, I went down to the market one day and I needed toothpaste. I went into a shop, and the guy turned around on the counter and handed me the only tube of toothpaste in the shop, probably in that area. It was no choice, just here's toothpaste. You know, it was probably really old, like that. So there's so many things that I get myself here because of all the kindness of others, you know? That's something to think about, right? Why don't you remind yourself of what, for arrogant people, what you don't know as opposed to what you do know. Remind yourself of what you don't know. Remind yourself of what you don't have. That's humbling. Remember your faults and imperfections. And this is like reflecting, really, in meditation. If I have a particularly prideful day, spending a little time that evening, you know. So it's not about remembering your faults and imperfections and getting down on it. It's just, you're trying to level the playing field there. You know, you're realizing, oh yeah, and it's just humbling. Just something to build humility. You can also think, as long as I'm in samsara, cyclic existence, my mind will be full of delusions and karma. what's there really to be proud of?
Mhm.
This is the situation I'm in, and then obviously remembering impermanence, things could change for us, and you could lose everything you have right now and be scrapped. You know, sometimes I found people really arrogant, and there's one woman in our community, she was always telling me what to do and always criticizing how I was a director in my last community, and it was really hard. Every time I'd see her, it got to the point where I'd see her getting out of her car, and I'd be like, oh no, what now? Like, what did I do wrong now? You know, what is it now? And then her husband left her after 23 years, 3 kids, and said, I don't love you anymore, left her for another woman. And boy, was that a trip, where she was calling me, you know, lonely, do you want to do something? You know, suddenly, it's just interesting how, so that can happen at any time. Suddenly, people are high, they fall low, things change. And then obviously meditation on emptiness, develop a sense of selflessness, understand how that I really exists, the I that feels pride. See if you can find that I. It's a good one like that. So let's look a bit at worry and fear that contributes to anxiety. So first we want to understand, how does it arise? Okay? The root of fear, the root of our misconception, again, the self-regard, the wish for others, is you have a misconception of how you exist fundamentally. Okay, we all have that. We all have that. Not understanding emptiness, the nature of reality, you have a misperception of how the I exists. That's where the delusions come from. Fundamental ignorance, we call it. Confusion. Okay? From this arises attachment to what is pleasant, fear of separating from or losing what we hold as dear. Okay? And what arises? Aversion, fear of the unpleasant, the unwanted experiences. From having a fundamental misunderstanding. Okay, here's the fundamental misunderstanding. I've done this in other classes. Whatever is walking toward you, and you have a person now in front of you, right? And all that's there is a fleshy, round thing like this, and a longer torso that has cloth on it, and 4 appendages. It's coming. Your sense faculty is taking that information in. That's all. Your eye consciousness sees something. That's it. Great, let's break it down. Eye consciousness sees something. Okay. So that's all. And the person may be walking toward you, starts opening their mouth, and what happens is you have karmic seeds in your mind, imprints from the past, and they start to color and dictate your external reality. So if you suddenly have a very pleasant seed you planted in the past, something really good you did with your body, speech, and mind, that will ripen in happiness. So you start to interpret what's out there, okay, in a certain way, and have a nice experience with that. But what happens is actually what we're doing, we over embellish what's out there. I don't actually see it for what it is. I over embellish and I suddenly project all these extra qualities on it. Right? So that's one part of the problem. And then the second part is, and then I see that, and then I get attached to it. Oh, nice, I like this, beautiful, wonderful, amazing, mine. I'm attracted to this person, I want them to be mine. That's what attachment does. Again, coming from fundamental ignorance, a fundamental misunderstanding. I don't really get to see what's there. And then here comes another example. Here's the person in front of you, the round thing and the thing, and okay, 4 appendages. And now I have karmic seeds, something bad that I did in the past, some nasty thing I said, some nasty thing I did, thought. It planted a seed, and now it's ripening as some suffering for me. So now what I do is interpret what's out there at this particular moment in time, and I underestimate what's out there. I'm not really seeing the qualities, I underestimate, and then I have aversion. Oh, I don't want that. Get that away from me. I don't like that person. Okay, so then you have hatred and anger arises. Everybody following? A little bit? Okay. So it's just fundamental confusion. We are confused, we misinterpret from the beginning. There's no beginning to the mind, but we misinterpret. Why do we misinterpret? Why do we have the ignorance? From a previous moment of that in the mind. From a previous moment of that. It's the root delusion. Okay? But through meditating on emptiness, you can fix that and get rid of that and really understand the nature of reality. And here's an example to take it a step further. Any of you worked at a place you didn't get along with your boss? Okay? It's very common, right? Somebody else likes your boss? In that scene? Somebody thought they were pretty good, got on with them really well, you didn't get on with them. Okay? Now the boss comes over to your desk, something messed up, you did a project, it was late, something messed up, the boss is going to tell you. And suddenly here comes the round, fleshy thing, the longer clothed torso thing, 4 appendages, comes over to you. There's a hole here. Out of this hole comes sound. Okay, the boss is yelling at you. But what's really happening is that. There's just sound coming out of this thing like that. You have some negative seeds ripening now from your karma. Something negative you did in the past, ripening, I don't like this. And you interpret the boss is yelling at me, I don't like this, right? But somebody else on the other side of the room is having a different karma ripen, likes the boss, and they don't like you, and they're really happy when they see the boss yelling at you. It's the same situation, 2 different interpretations based on your karmic seeds. So basically the reason I'm mentioning this is we want to understand how that I exists in the face of any of these, but let's talk about fear and worry right now. Here's some antidotes. So first, the main thing is let's try to understand how we exist to break it down. That's what I just mentioned. Here's one antidote. Okay, be aware of and acknowledge your fears. Okay. Think about number 1, samsara, cyclic existence. Its very nature is suffering. So therefore, as long as we are in samsara, we will experience problems. That's its nature. I mentioned before, if you are in the middle of a swimming pool filled with water, you don't flail about and say, it's wet here. That's the nature of water. Everyone knows that. So when you come in contact with water, there's no surprise. It's moist. So samsara, that's its nature. So things are going to bother you. That's part of the situation as a human being in samsara. So accepting this on some level can decrease fear. Okay, and remember, it's definitely possible to become free of samsara by practicing Dharma. You can get out of that situation permanently. But a little bit of acknowledgement, this is samsara. You know, when I wake up at night worried about money for the center, and I think of these other responsibilities I have at the center, and I'm a little bit too busy, and all the, you know, the moving around and the things we want to develop, and I could go on and on. I mean, we have a great center, it's going really well, but you know, there's things. And then I just think, this is samsara. I can move and say I want another job and I'll do it someplace else, and there'd be another problem. There'd be something else to worry about. There's always something to worry about, right? You know, especially for warriors. Seriously, you know, some people, my nephew at the age of, he was just always a worrier. 2 or 3, we notice, 2 or 3. There's some people that just, it's a little bit more their tendency. Some people don't worry. Some people, it's so that if there's your thing, this is samsara, this is my thing. This is one of my problems, I worry, right, you'd say, like that. I'll tell you a funny story. My nephew, he learned to read early at the age of 3. He could read certain words. He could. So my sister got, I know I told this in other classes, but he got a, she happened to get a teen girls magazine because a friend of hers wrote an article in it. So she bought it to support her friend. She said, oh, I got an article printed, great. She bought it. It was home, he was looking through it. There's lots of advertisements. He read one. He comes running in the kitchen to my sister, and I think he's 3 years old, and he says to her, you know, Mommy, I need this. I need this. And all he could read on it, it said worry-free. Advertisement, worry-free. He could read that. And he knew at the age of 3, he knew he worried. And he came running in and he said, she called me, she told me, and he said, I need that, what is this? Like he couldn't read anything else, but he said, I need this. What is this? What is it? That on this page, what was the rest? And it was an ad for OB tampons. So she said she was making dinner and she looked at it. And then she said, no, this is for girls. She goes, it's not for boys, not for little boys, it's for girls. So then he was very disappointed. Like he thought there was this external thing that, and I've actually worked with him a bit on he's 23 now. He's great, he's a great guy. But so what happens is, he has a habit of worrying. I've watched this since 3 years old. I mean, what do you have to worry about at 3? But he had things to worry about. Okay, so he has a pattern. I think it came from past life. He had a pattern, you know. The rest of the people in the family don't worry. So he didn't get it from them. They don't worry at all. So 3 years. So what I noticed is he would, as soon as one worry got taken care of, could have been in school sharing this toy, you know, then he'd replace it. That one was done. He'd have another one. So he got older. He went to university. Competitive university. So, okay, lots of concerns, and he'd say to me, well, then this, and these exams, and then they have this, and then they have that. Okay. Then it finished. He passed did really well. Okay, comes out, got a job. Okay, great going. You don't have to worry about that, you have a job. He had a job. So then there was planning a holiday with his girlfriend. So then there was a worry, and this thing, and it kind of mushroomed into a thing, and I said, you know what? It's just a holiday. I said, so, you know, if it's really causing you that much stress, don't do it then. Because it's just a holiday. It's not work, it's not money, it's not your degree and your credits, and are you going to get... I said, this isn't a really important thing. And then he said, oh yeah, you know, that's true. But he could see that. He said, that's true. And then he got through that. And then I said to him, but before he did it, and I said, but you know what? You're going to finish that, and you ought to check already what you're going to replace that with. What's the next worry you're going to replace it with? I said, because you're going to need something. And then he kind of went, oh yeah. I said, you know, just to see, because what are you worried about? You have a place to live, you have good money coming in, you have a good job, you're smart, you have a nice girlfriend. Like, what possibly, you know, right now could he be worried about? And he realized, because there really isn't anything to worry about. So he just realized, I said, yeah, you're just going to replace it. I said, I'm interested to hear what your next worry is, because I know you're just going to replace it with... And then he kind of was like, ah. So now he's worried about that. What is, you know, what, thinking about... No, he's not worried actually right now. So, you know, break into it. This is samsara. And, okay, here's the antidote. A natural antidote, standard one, to fear is courage. Courage. So let's look at, what does that mean? This can be developed by facing your fears. Understanding exactly what it is you fear, and asking yourself this, okay? I don't know if this speaks to the people that, you know, is it reasonable to have this fear? And I also know there's long ingrained anxiety that can be very big and sometimes needs medical treatment, but is it reasonable? Is there anything I can do to prevent this unwanted thing from happening or minimize the chances of it happening? Is there little or nothing that can be done, and should I just learn to accept it and let go? Possible? So I know some people have a habit of always worrying that probably has come from past lives. This woman in our community, the young woman I mentioned who was with us a few years ago for a work study, she was a worrier from the age of 3. Her worries got out of proportion, like deep-rooted anxiety, whatever karma was ripening. So I would work with her with the fears, and she said things to me like, I said, so what's happening, how's it going today? You know, each day. And she said, well, today I'm worried that, and she was worried she had rabies. This was when she was working in our garden, and she says, I'm worried that I got rabies. And I said, okay, so let's look at that. We don't have much rabies in Vermont. And just, it's, you know, it's unheard of, basically. Okay, so I said, okay, so this was real for her. And I said, so have you come in contact with any rabid animals in the last few days? She said, no. And I said, and are you aware if you first have to come in contact with a rabid animal, you need their saliva to make a blood connection with you. It has to enter your bloodstream, as far as I know about rabies, because I've been in some countries with rabies. And so I said, has that happened to you? She said, no. And I said, so do you really think it's likely that you got rabies? And she said, no. You know, so she broke it up, but she just had habits of such extreme anxiety that even that she couldn't, you know, but for most people, think about it. What are you really worried about? And His Holiness sometimes will say, can you do something about it? Then act and do what you can as compassionately, wisely as possible. And if not, can you just accept? For me at the center, if I wake up worrying, then I go, okay, wait a minute. What I need to do is I have to get that fundraising or membership committee together. I know I need to do that. I need to call those people. And that's basically, you know, I'm doing whatever I can do. So it's like I can't really do much more right now in the middle of the night. So that's all. And I'm practicing, I realize if I worry or don't, it doesn't bring in any more money to the center. You know. So I've taught myself over time it doesn't really help to just keep worrying, and it sometimes obstructs me, but it paralyzes people from doing what they have to do, from taking action. So here's another one. Cultivate the practice of taking refuge. For those of you at that level where you want to take refuge in Buddhism, or you want to see, is the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha jewels, are they an infallible source of protection for us from more suffering? The Buddha is free of all fears, is omniscient and clairvoyant, all-knowing. So wouldn't that be somebody that I think could maybe help me? You know, I mean, a path to that? Or what about the teachers, the highly realized beings that might be an example of that? Wouldn't they really be able to advise me? We run to our friends for help when we want help. But aren't they limited, a lot of our friends? So again, these are questions you have to investigate thoroughly. Would this be a possible path for me? So the Buddha, his teachings, the Dharma, his followers, could be suitable objects for me to rely upon and find support in, take refuge in. You know, one time in California, I booked a flight to come back to the East to see my parents. And when I called to, it was the old days, you had to call and confirm. So I confirmed, and they said, we have a record for you, but it's been canceled. Your reservation's been canceled. So I said, really? I said, well, when did that happen? Who did that? It wasn't me. They said, well, we're sorry anyway, so it was rebooked. And I went back again, and it was canceled again, second time. So then I started thinking, is this like a message from the universe? Like, is this plane going to crash, and should I do something? And I didn't know, and I ended up talking to one of the lamas that was there at the time, Rinpoche Rinpoche, I was really close with. Somehow I was doing something with him, talking with him, and then I just said, you know, Rinpoche, can I ask you a simple question? And I explained. And he just looked at me, and I said, do you think the plane is... And he said, well, if you have a proper refuge, it doesn't matter if the plane crashes or not. But he just like... And I kind of thought, that's different, you know. But he just, you know, it's like really if things are going to happen, and really if you have the right refuge, that doesn't really matter. He was right. Anyway, the plane didn't crash, but sometimes it, you know, might. So it's something to think about. Some of the worries we get going, and now my family, my brother and his kids, we joke a lot. We call it first world problems. Right? Have you heard this? And my niece will be like, something, and then all of a sudden she'll look at me, and I'll think like, this is not a problem. And then she'll look at me and she'll go, first world problem. Like, it's not really a problem that she's worried about. Like something will be, you know, it's like my nephew worrying about the holiday. You know, what are you, nuts? Worrying about a holiday? But we get patterns of, you make the booking and you do the things, and then there's concern. And so also here's another one. Think about karma, the law of cause and effect, when you're worried. Okay, there's a reason why unwanted experiences happen to us. Because of actions in previous lifetimes or this lifetime. So if you're worried about something bad happening, I'm going to get cancer, or the cancer won't be curable, or this tumor will be malignant, or these things happening, you do whatever medical things you can do for it. That's all you can do. And sometimes the karma plays out, and it is something really serious, and sometimes it's not. But instead of all the mental activity, which I think gets stored in the body anyway, in not great ways, you know, certainly concern will come up in your mind. It's totally normal for things like that. You know, your life gets threatened. It's scary for us. But let's try to put it in perspective as much as we can. And some of our worries aren't even things like that. I mean, that's a real worry. Some of the worries, you know, if you really analyze them, it's like it said, is it reasonable to be worried about this? You haven't come in contact with any rabid animals. So really you really have to analyze like that. And karma can also explain why you have certain fears, worries, concerns, and phobias, like I mentioned. This young woman, she came in with that whole set of it. There wasn't anything going on in this world that I could discern from knowing her and hearing about her background. You come in with stuff. My nephew at age 3, he came in with that karma of worrying. Just some people are, you know people. Some people are more nervous. Some people are more arrogant. Some people are really chilled out. You know, whatever happens, they're just kind of like, yeah, whatever. You know, some people are very agitated quickly. You know, people have different propensities, and that's just from past karma. And it's all impermanent, and it's all changing, like that. You know, so like for instance, if you had a great fear of dogs in this life, being bit by a dog, could have come from being bit by a dog in the last life or being attacked by a bunch of dogs. And you won't know that, but certainly there's things like that. So here's another one, fear and worry. There's a few more. The ultimate fear we have is death. Generally, that's a huge one for people. Okay? So if you're able to do some death meditation, there's various death meditations to do. I don't have the time to talk about it here, but you really start to get a sense that I am going to die. That happens to everybody, right? It starts to dissolve that a little bit, but also that then you can make sure that you are being prepared for that experience as much as possible. Am I ready for death? What if tomorrow I was told that I had 6 months? How would your mind be in the next 6 months? Are you ready for that experience? You know, so sometimes it's helpful to live a little bit like that every day, like it could come at any moment, not morbidly, just with an awareness, and I'm ready, and that you're completing communication you want to say to people every moment that you're with them. Could be sucking in. I know when I used to leave my grandmother when she was old, and I'd often, with my grandmother and old people, you think, this could be the last time I see her. You know, she's in her 90s. But more and more, I train to just do that with everybody, because I don't know when somebody younger, and then later I hear about somebody died, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know that'd be the last time I saw them. So it's kind of nice to keep that heightened with people. You don't have to say anything to them. Well, this could be the last time we see each other, you know. but in your mind, make sure that you really are speaking to someone. Are you really present when you're talking to people? You know, be there with them, because it could be the last time that you're, especially if it's a loved one. How often do we do that? So then you're not suddenly dying or in some kind of situation, or they're across the world and they're dying, and you think of like all the things you wanted to say. All the things, you know, that creates worry for people, concern. When your mind gets caught up in a cycle of unnecessary worrying, which is a habit, okay, try to break the habit by reciting mantras, saying prayers or something. Have something positive that immediately you cut in, you break and interrupt the pattern with. You know, there are people, I had her doing some stuff, she said it was really helpful, this young woman. Other mantras, say this, think, you know, when that thought comes up, then I want you to think this. And she did it, and when she was doing it regularly, she said it was really helpful, right? So see if there's things like that, that some of us know mantras, and the same thing, when you have negative thoughts, arrogant thoughts, interject with the mantra, but it works really well with worry, because it just gets to be this anxiety circling. Guilt as well, guilty thoughts, you can recite the mantras on. Here's another thing, keeping a balance with worry and fear. Okay, so you've got two extremes. You've got excessive worry, which some of us get into, right? And then you have being irresponsible. Okay, so if you're not being irresponsible and you're really doing what you're supposed to be doing, there's really nothing to worry about. But at least it keeps a balance, we're a little bit. So I'm doing all I can do, and that's the reasonable investigating. Is this reasonable to have this concern? Is there anything more I can do about it? Then act on it. And if there isn't, I just have to accept this is what's happening. Is that helpful, do you think? Is that
Oh, yeah.
a few things like that? So how about depression? Oh wait, let me look a little bit. Let me see if guilt is similar here. I had a few notes I put about guilt. If you feel guilty about something that you've done, again, investigate. Okay, examine with wisdom, whatever understanding you have. Is this really something that I did that I should feel negative about? That, what was my responsibility in it? So analyze, because sometimes you see it's just a pattern. And I didn't really do anything this time. Like that. And so that way you can remedy it, you can apologize to someone, you can do whatever remedies you need. And then there's practice. The 4 opponent powers with Vajrasattva practice, frustrations, there's other things. Actually, those that want to get into stronger practice, those kind of things are great. So either externally do what you need to do of apologizing or stepping up if there's something, and then otherwise, it's just a pattern and do your practices. So in some cases you discover with guilt that really you haven't done anything wrong, and you're just subjected to somebody else's blame, some unfair blame, maybe their own misery, their unfulfilled expectations, or unrealistic expectations, right? So in this case, meditate again on karma, the law of cause and effect. A little bit to understand how this situation, I must have created the cause to be in this situation. You can meditate on patience for the other person, compassion for them, things like that. Compassion that they didn't really understand, and so therefore they think I'm doing this, stuff like that. That can help deflect a bit with guilt. And sorry, you had a question right there. Yeah.
Samsara? I'm not familiar with that.
Yes, sorry. Samsara is cyclic existence. So what it is, it's a cycle. It's a Sanskrit word that means to turn, to cycle, and you're cycling through birth, old age, sickness, and death, and all of that is suffering. Yeah, samsara. Thanks. Okay, let's look at depression. And actually, to tell you the truth, on the FPMT website, for certain classes, there's pages on depression. Rinpoche just has pages. The Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive has a whole lot of advice Lama Zopa Rinpoche has given just on depression alone. Because so many people suffer from it, okay? Here's a few antidotes, and again, with depression, you want to analyze. What is depression, okay? Number one, what is depression, okay? So here there's, this is interesting from Rinpoche's thing. In the book, Mind and Mental Factors, which is one of the foremost, there's also Mind and Its Functions. These are books written about the mind that are great. Geshe Rapton wrote Mind and Mental Factors. I use it a lot in my courses on the mind. And then there is, Mind and Its Functions, Geshe Rapton. And Mind and Mental Factors, or Mind in Tibetan Buddhism, is Lati Rinpoche. I think with Betsy Napper, they wrote a book like that. And they're great, and it goes through, the different mental factors and how they manifest, the positive ones, the negative ones, root delusions, all of that. And so, in the book, there isn't a mention of the word depression in this book, which is, it tells you a lot about the Tibetan system, okay? They don't actually specifically talk about stuff like that. Sometimes it could be called the laziness of discouragement, also known as self-pity. It's different what we think of as depression. But see, that's where depression can come from, right? You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you procrastinate and on and on and on, and then the self-pity, I'm worthless, I'm useless, and then it starts molting into something deeper. So it's very interesting to really see how it comes from. It's not just like I'm sad. There's a whole path into that, okay? It becomes manifest, obviously, depression and thoughts that I am so inferior, I could never attain any insight or liberation, I never do anything right. You depreciate your own potential. I'm hopeless, I'm ugly, I'm unlovable. Nobody could ever love me. Okay, here's some antidotes to this. Again, similar to worry and fear, examine what your mind is saying and ask yourself, actually correct what is not realistic. So I asked you to do this yesterday. So depression often involves a repetitive, self-critical thought or thoughts. I'm worthless, nobody cares about me, I never do anything right. And so I asked you yesterday if you really checked, I did it with both of you, if you really checked, I had a very different experience. You know, if you were saying, well, I don't do this, and then you started to tell me what you do, and I had a very different experience. But what's happening is you're not giving that airtime. You're not allowing yourselves to see that goodness that you're doing and that you are. Like that. So this is the rebalancing. You have to examine and get in there. You can't just leave it, well, this is how I am. If you want to stay like that, you can. But if you go in and say, you know, actually that thought wasn't really the whole story. You know, I actually this was good that I did, and that was so-so. So, okay, a little bit of both. Okay? So again, I mentioned about changing the tape, you know, accessing a new song on the MP3 player. You have this deeply, you know, you might have a whole section of depression stuff about yourself, and eventually you're undoing that pattern. Eventually to the point where I said, you don't access those songs anymore. Mm-hmm. And eventually you delete them. Delete the file. Or you can visualize a cassette tape for me it was in the cassette age, and then I just eventually stopped pushing the button to play that tape. I'd be like, oh, there's that tape again. Okay, I know that tape, that's not my whole story, just a tape. And eventually I visualized tossing them, gone, entirely. But it takes time. So replace these thoughts with positive, realistic ones. Can you do that? You know, for instance, I do have some good qualities. Everybody does, right? There are people who care about you, right? You say nobody cares about you. There are people that care about you, I bet. Everyone in this room, I bet there's someone who cares about you. There are things I do well, right? I'm sure. I'm sure. But this is something you'd almost say to yourself, there are things I do well. I mess this up right now, but there are things I do well. And then here comes the other line again. Work on cultivating acceptance, love, and compassion for ourselves. That's hard. It's really hard for people who are depressed. So again, cultivating acceptance, love, and compassion for yourself. And again, I think you said it, or I'm not sure, but somebody was saying, well, I can be kind with others. Like when I think of others, I'd certainly want to free them from suffering and help them. And so that's why the Tonglen, I think Bob said it in the Tonglen meditation. So how about starting with ourselves? You know, you have friends that say, oh, I'm crap, I never do anything right. And you go, no, you don't. You're a good person. So how about ourselves? So here's another thing, depression. Wait, let me just go through these and then I'll take some questions. Consciously bring to mind and feel joyful about the things you have going for you and your good qualities. Think about good people around you that you've cultivated. Think about your potential to change your mind. Your potential to become more living, more caring, your potential to help others, to become enlightened. All of you in this room have that potential right now. It's amazing. Many people living on the planet now don't have that potential going. It's not activated right now. The potential's in them, but it's not activated. It's amazing. So this is about having a precious human rebirth. This is what I started Monday night on, and we're going to talk more about it tomorrow night. Having a precious human rebirth. So the initial meditation we did this morning was the drop of gratitude. It's just appreciate that a bit. You created all that for yourself. You know, you got yourself to Kurukulla Center here right now because of yourself, not because of anybody. Nobody did it for you. It's all because you had a seed in you that you created past lives like that. Your mind did that for you. Thank you very much. Something to rejoice about. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. You're seeking now a way out of your suffering. I rejoice. That's a great thing. And you can feel joyful. It says, and feel joyful. Consciously bring to mind and feel joyful about. So this is using the mindfulness and awareness, bring these things to mind and feel joyful. You're not elated and out of control. It's like, that's good. It's a good thing. And again, you could go on to, I mentioned relatively clean air and water, good food, warm, comfortable bed, living in a safe area. I mean, on and on. Okay? The fact that you're alive right now, the fact that you can walk into this room unattended, you can talk, you can see, that's fantastic. We take that for granted every moment, but then something happens to you that threatens that, and suddenly, you're humbled. One time walking back from Nepal, the mountains, I blew my knees out the first time. I didn't know the descents. Anyway, I walked for 8 days in utter pain. Unbelievable pain. There was no way to fly out, I just had to walk. And normally what would have been like a 6-hour-a-day walk took me 10, in excruciating pain, and I was timing the ibuprofen, trying to, and boy was it humbling, because I would limp to the place, the lodge for the next night, trying to get to the bus, and there were sometimes little excursions I was going to do from there, and I couldn't walk, I just had to get there and take care of my knees, and really unbelievable. And boy did it humble me with people that couldn't walk, or that weren't, I never again thought of them, the same, because I was really like, wow. Had a little experience of not being able to walk for, at one point. So sometimes it's helpful, those little situations. So think about now, it's amazing. And then if there's a serious problem you are depressed about, and it's a pattern for you as well, and it could be guilt or whatever things that are going, could manifest into guilt, like we did in the meditation, it's helpful to bring others to mind that experience this all the time. And many that have worse problems than you, right? Many people on the planet. Then you could try some Tonglen meditation. But just to have the wish that, wow, there's so many of these people, and I wish I could, if I'm going to feel this way, let me take on their depression, let them be free, and I'll really generate a wish for them to be happy. That's a huge space of mind to have. If you just put that pattern in your mind, and if you die, and that's all that you remember of your spiritual practice is that, I think no problem. If you're dying, your mind with my dying, can I take on others' suffering, their cancer, their heart disease, whatever it is, and give them all my happiness. And you die at that moment, thinking of others like that, no problem. Nothing to worry about, I don't think. And however bad things may seem for you, right? It can always be worse.
Right.
Right? Isn't that true?
Oh, yeah.
But sometimes we feel like this is it, but oh no, it can always be worse. It can always be. So put it in perspective. Put it in perspective. So any meditation on precious human rebirth is an antidote to depression, low self-esteem, like that. Again, thinking about samsara, some of these are standard. Think about samsara, it's nature, suffering, you were going to suffer at times. But again, that it's definitely possible to be free of samsara. Again, seeing the nature of your mind, reflect on that. How your unhappy, depressed, or guilty thoughts and feelings, they're not physical, they're impermanent, they're like clouds in the sky. And as you know, those people that have been depressed, people that have worried, there's moments when they're not worried or depressed. So you know that that's possible. It's just a matter of expanding on that, right? Do things that help others, especially those in great need. Volunteer at a nursing home, at a soup kitchen, is a great way to pop you out of depression. Because a lot of those thoughts are just cycling in. Me, myself, and I. So volunteer and help somebody else. Also, physical exercise can help people with a lot of those delusions of worry, excessive worry, particularly depression, anxiety. It gets you out of your mind. Let the body do some stuff. Sometimes that really helps. I used to visualize, When I lived in Washington, D.C., I was doing this political work. It was very intense, and it was just too much in my mind, too much anxiety. And I would swim at night. I swam, I don't know, 4 or 5 days a week when I got home from work, at about an hour each time. And I just visualized it all pouring out of my as I breathe, pouring out of my ears, pouring out of my mouth, my nose as I breathe, and the swimming. And then I'd get out of the pool, I'd feel much better. Just reduced it, just totally got into my body. And every time the thoughts would be in there, I'm like, they're just cycling out, cycling out. I wasn't even into the Dharma then. Just let it pour through you. It was really helpful. Questions? Yes?
Most of the time, like learning Buddhism, they say that self-cherishing, to me, is the one that I've heard causes the most depression. And if you get out of that, like meditating on your belly button, you know, you're always thinking of yourself. I mean, it happens with me too. So I look for volunteer work, and there isn't anything that I really feel a call to, and I know what I can do, you know, like I was an art teacher, or I was in the arts and things like that, but I still kind of resist it. So I felt low, and I know that that's the problem. Is it the major problem? Because I see people like us, you know, somebody tells me her daughter is depressed, and she says, oh, but it's chemical. And then somebody else says, well, I'm depressed, but you know, I don't eat right, or I'm getting older and my hormonal and enzyme balances are changing, and nutrition, they blame it on that. So, for the most part, I'm not sure if I believe those physical things. I think it's really people getting involved themselves, like you call it self-pity, self-cherishing.
Yeah, I mean, are those people involved in the Dharma?
One of them I suspect maybe, but I can't get it from her. I mean, she once came to a meditation. She looked like she knew how to meditate, but I'm not sure. You know, she may do it somewhere.
Yeah, because most of the rest of the world, and especially if you understand, you see what's going on in the States right now, most of the rest of the world outside of Dharma will try to find some external thing to relieve it, or external thing to blame. But Dharma, again, being a Buddhist is being an inner being. So that means I want to find the source in my mind that's causing this. That's where it comes from. It doesn't come from anywhere else. It comes from your mind. So, and again in the States, if you notice, probably in Boston as well, but certainly in Philadelphia, when I mentioned I watched a little bit of TV with my dad, there's certain times of the day, and every other commercial is a medical selling a drug. Ask your doctor about this pill, with horrible side effects. But what Americans want is, we just want a pill to take to make us feel better. A lot of Americans aren't really into preventative stuff and wanting to, you know, not like other countries, and we very much want a pill. So they brainwash you, ask your doctor, and then you go to your doctor and say, I want this pill. I heard about this pill on TV. Can you give me that for my depression? People are well over-medicated in the States. Incredibly over-medicated for anxiety and depression. That's been my experience.
I mean, when I did the same thing.
It doesn't mean that medication can't help you. It can help you. It can help you through certain things. But for people to be on it for 20 years, they're not good for you. They all list amazing side effects that include death. So do you really want to be on, you have to think about it. I mean, certainly they can help, but I think we have to look at the mind. Now granted, there are some incredible mental illnesses that have manifested for people based on karma, on their past karma, that do need serious medical attention. So it's not to say, you know, if somebody's psychotic, they need help. But Lama Yeshe used to say, practicing Dharma is not for the mentally ill. You have to be pretty well to practice Dharma. To practice Dharma well, put it that way.
I mean, the best I felt was like one winter I was swimming a lot because I visited my parents, and there was a pool in their complex, but it happened to be an old complex. It was 125 feet long, so I knew an hour was about a mile. And it was great. I oxygenated my body, and I felt good. And the other time I was doing 2 years of yoga certification, so that really kept me in tune.
Great.
You know it works, but
yeah,
I
that's
work
great.
better in groups. I work better when I'm motivated with other people. I mean, I'm not that, like I
Right.
said yesterday, self-discipline.
Right.
I was just wondering what the statistics were versus the other, and it wasn't the person saying.
I'm sorry, the statistics of what?
whether
What's your
it was
actual question?
chemical or
It's a mix.
nutritional versus self-care.
It's a mix. It's all a factor in your own. I mean, I've noticed, you know, people that eat too much sugar. You notice it affects you. People that drink too much caffeine. If I had caffeine now, I have, you know, 1 cup of green tea a day for the benefit of all beings, right? I can't have coffee anymore, caffeinated coffee. You don't want to be around me. I have too much energy. So I just know that it makes me crazy. It makes me like a crazy person. So diet, we all know diet affects our body and mind. We all know exercise affects our body and mind. I mean, these are natural things, but the thing is you still have karmic seeds in your mind that are basically calling most of the shots. But those things will certainly affect stuff. We know there's work stressors that affect things. People who get laid off, unbelievable source of depression. But you have to know, there are people that got laid off. You can't say that getting laid off is a source of depression because there's people that got laid off that are not depressed.
Sure.
You know, so it's got to come from the mind. You have to analyze a little bit, right? Examine that. Yes.
You mentioned mantras, and I find them incredibly helpful, especially for anxiety. But they're also something that they remind me of a tradition that I used to practice where that was actually a similar, saying the rosary or some sort of thing, where it was actually an active kind of prayer meditative thing. What is mantra? Is it, because some days I don't feel like I can actually meditate very well, but I can do a mantra. I can do, and is that the same? Is that is it equivalent to meditation? Is it equivalent to?
It's slightly different.
Okay.
There will be meditations you do with a mantra. So the white light one we did yesterday, sometimes you do it with a Vajrasattva mantra, it's more powerful. Okay? But the actual, so that way it would be holding your mind focused on an object, a visual, let's say an aspect of the Buddha, and then doing that with a mantra. And that could be considered meditation. There are some mantra recitations that just on its own, but usually you'd have a visualization with it.
Okay.
Can be helpful. I'll put it that way, can be helpful. But if you're just countering something negative comes up in the mind, or my speech is really trash, and all of a sudden, oh, money, pay me home, money, then that's great. That's a great start. Yeah, and it can be meditative as well. So it's a form of meditation type of, I wouldn't say it's so formal just like that alone, but it's really helpful.
Okay.
Yeah,
Excellent.
great.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can you please recommend a book for? Oh, thank you. It's actually more of echoing his question. Is the end of the book? Oh, here's.
Thank you. Can you please recommend a book that actually is a mantra book that, like you said, accompanied with a visualization, and the book actually.
Right. I know that Lillian too has this beautiful mantra book, but I don't know if it has the visualizations in it. Is one, but How to Meditate, I think, may have some. It has visualizations in there for certain, and I can't remember if it has specific mantras like that. I don't know of a book that has all the visualizations with mantras, because they're usually in separate books. So one that I know of is the practice booklet, which is Shakyamuni Buddha practice booklet, which is right here in this bookshop. And it's a very thin little booklet, and that's actually a practice with the Buddha, a visualization of the Buddha. It's very great. It's a phenomenal beginning practice. Not just beginning, but if you want to get a practice started and you're not sure what to do or say, it takes you through various prayers, has a visualization of the Buddha with the Buddha's mantra, all in there, all explained. It's very, very nice. And easy, very easy.
Mantra is Sanskrit, or is it English?
The mantra is in English phonetics, so very easy to be able to pronounce. And then there are other books, like if you got a Vajrasattva practice booklet, there's one from the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive. It's a little yellow pocket book.
Yes,
They may have some here.
Yeah.
So that's another one that will have a visualization explanation of the practice of Vajrasattva, which is a Buddha, an image of the Buddha that is for us to purify. And it has Vajrasattva's mantra. So those are two that I know. But basically each deity has its own practice book. And FPMT has a lot of these available. And here, thank you, Wendy. Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is great. Thanks. Oh yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So Wendy just brought in, thank you so much. This is the Shakyamuni Buddha practice booklet that has the Buddha's mantra. And then Wendy put in how to meditate. Okay. Kathleen McDonald has the recitation of the Medicine Buddha, and she talks about mantra in here. Prayer to the Medicine Buddha, she has the Medicine Buddha's mantra, how you do the visual. So that exists in this book as well, how you would do a deity practice with a visualization of an aspect of the Buddha with a mantra. And that's a few, but basically each deity, like if it's Tara, a female manifestation, Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion, Manjushri, all of them, VFPMT has a lot of practice booklets for sale on their website, and then in that booklet it has how you visualize and it'll have the mantra,
Yeah,
like that.
I would like to have.
That's great, yeah. And I would just start slowly, start with one or two, and learn how to do those practices, and then you can go on from there. Yeah. Is there anything else? Yes. Maybe one last question?
There are so many different books, so many different teachers, so many different ideas that you've given us just in these 2 days. And the question is, for me, how do I start and what am I starting with? You said yesterday, simplify. So it seems as though I've just complicated things a lot.
Right.
So can you give us some advice as to how to go about starting?
I mentioned this the other day as well. This is, I think, a great overview for people starting that want a little bit of a structured practice. You know, there's a number of prayers. You don't have to do them all at one time. It helps to learn what they mean. The significance will mean more, but you can just read through it. It's a daily meditation practice with the Buddha involved. But it has prayers. It has a Lam Rim prayer. And if this is too much, if you don't want to get into something like that, I would get How to Meditate, this book, and then I would, well, you could either do this book. I also have a book for sale. I co-authored, Buddhism in a Nutshell, out there, and it has a CD in the back of me teaching. So there's much more of me teaching than is in the book that I wrote, but there are little meditations. So you could try something like that. That's option 2. And option 3, the simplest, would be as you're waking up in the morning, just what I explained, is do those practices. They're really simple. You know, as you're waking up in the morning, realize you're coming into consciousness, set a motivation, experience gratitude for your life. Maybe then get up if you want, have like a little 5 or 10 minutes, little concentration on the breath. And a little bit like that. That would be the simplest. In the evening, dedicate the merit and think about the good things you did. Commit to doing better the things that didn't go well and dedicate the merit. That would be the simplest way to do it. And just try to do 5 minutes morning, 5 minutes, then maybe 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night. I would continue to come to classes here. If you can, come up and do a retreat with us in Vermont at Milarepa Center. You get a little bit deeper experience of it and a little bit more instruction like that, and just keep going like that. Read some more books. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Sure. So I just wanted to thank you. I hope, has this been helpful for people? You got some things. I know these are hard things, depression and anxiety. This is no easy feat, but we are Bodhisattva warriors. We are better than this. We can do this. And that's why we're here together also, so we can help each other. We really need to help each other too. We're not isolated in this. So again, the basic thing is just some kindness to yourself and to others. That's the simplicity of it. Is, you know, when you notice you're not being kind to yourself, and guilt is not being kind to yourself, depression, but these things just get going, so it's not bad. It's just that maybe I need to give myself a hug visually. You know, maybe I just, you know, like when somebody feels guilty or somebody feels depressed or anxious, like that's what I want to do for them sometimes. You know, so it's like I deserve that too. Maybe I need something, a little treat for myself that, and so I hope it's useful, and I hope you'll continue, you know, coming to the classes here and use all that, you know, the different information they're giving, which is great. So I hope if something's useful, great. If not, just leave it. And I would like to dedicate, in the end, any merit that we have created, all the positive energy that we've created, to very much help us to overcome the various delusions in our mind, particularly anxiety and depression. May we be able to become aware of them and then apply the appropriate antidotes, so learning those antidotes well, and really consistently trying to do that as well as alongside it, building a consistent meditation practice. Because that'll help us better identify the delusions and do that work. So I would like to dedicate, and so that we can become fully enlightened. And the reason we really want to reach that state is we then will be completely unlimited in how we can best serve all other beings. So for the purpose of benefiting all others, may we dedicate in that way. I'd also like to dedicate to the long lives of all of our teachers. And I'd like to dedicate to Francesca Fedullo in San Jose, California, who is suffering quite intensely right now with cancer. May she be healed instantly. May she gather her strength, be able to have more treatment. And all the other people in the world suffering from illnesses, may they be healed instantly and have peace of mind. May there be peace in all world systems. So again, I'd like to read in the Gold Prayer Book, Master Shantideva's prayer. It's on page 32, paragraph 3. So let's send this wish out to all beings on the planet, page 32. 32? And if you don't have it, you can share with each other. Somebody's. It starts with, may all beings everywhere. You see that paragraph 3? May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.